for textbook adoption for the science adoption. We just currently went through this year. We've completed the textbook adoption cycle, and we are ready to make our purchases. As we discussed before, we went through the blanket adoption, which means our options are open as we move forward with adoption, or as we move forward with the new science standards and the new science testing works correctly. We will see that if, towards the end of the cycle, if we need to look at other options for supplementary purposes, we can do that with the blanket adoption. And so in front of you, or on the screen, you've got the total amount that we will be purchasing from Tennessee Book Company. We are falling in line with Discovery Ed for grades 3 through 8, and that is a collaboration of a tech book, which is a supplemental resource that students can have as a hard copy, and individual student licenses. So it will go along with our one-to-one initiative in 21st Century Learning. And the high schools, each subject area has a different publisher that they have gone with based on the needs of what their curriculum is and what the teachers and stakeholders voted on. So those are also as part of the attachment.
Any questions?
Are you all excited about having new books? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, they asked the
It's been a while.
It has been a while. Yes, it has.
Any questions, Lisa?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
But we will recycle the old science textbooks that we currently have. That's about the only use we have left of those because they are very old. But we will recycle those and have those picked up.
Okay. How will that change? Just curious, because I know that one of the comments that had been made by some of the teachers at the middle school was that because the textbooks were so out of date, that they had kind of gone to their own, basically piecemealing for the curriculum. Is there a relearning for the teachers when you have new textbooks like this of how they might need to relook at what their lesson plans are?
I'll jump into this too.
Sure.
I think we should always view textbooks as being a supplement to what they're doing in the classroom.
Okay.
We have the scope and sequence, we have the standards from the state that we should be following, and that should be something that's the best aligned to it, but there's no such thing as a perfectly aligned textbook. Okay. So know that that is something that they should be using, and they should be adding that. It should add extra benefit to what they've currently been doing. So having lived through several science adoptions, that's what I taught to. Know that you have found those activities, those resources online that are great, that you think really hit that standard, and you can continue using those, but know that this is just going to be more supplemental material for you. But
and as with any textbook adoption cycle for the state, along with it comes the new standards. So this summer we have standards training, professional development for our teachers to attend. We've registered a group because we are allotted certain spots, and then we open it up, or the state opens it up to the just general public. And so we went and requested anybody that wanted to attend to get on the team because we had the spots, and then we sent out an email to remind everybody, hey, it's open for public registration, so go ahead if you want to be in that, and then they'll come back and redeliver. So that is additional training on the new standards. And another piece that was a good selling point for us for Discovery Ed was the professional development package that comes along with the textbook adoption. And so they will come in and train teachers how to use the tech books, how to use the online textbook, how to come in and use any additional resources and additional labs.
That's great.
So we're excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Suzanne, you mentioned the middle school teachers that did that. I'm not asking for names, but how many of those middle school teachers expressed that dilemma?
All of them. The science teachers is what I mean.
All the science teachers?
Yeah. They're not a plethora of science teachers, but.
Of all the grades?
Yes.
Okay.
And just because it's been so long, it's not, they're doing a great job. The way that the materials that they've prepared were phenomenal, given that there wasn't a textbook there because it was, just not up to date.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, they didn't express that to me, but I'll find out about it. Okay. All right.
Next item is the annual review revision of policies after first reading. Who's up first? I figured looking at the policy you were, but.
Yes. So the first one up for revision is policy 4.203.1, honors, advanced placement, dual enrollment, and dual credit courses. This is that, do you
No, I hit the wrong one. I'm so sorry.
So this policy is actually not a suggested policy by TSBA. It's one that we've had as part of our policies since the inception of our district. So when we review this policy, in my department, we see it as it is strictly talking about honors, advanced placement, dual enrollment, dual credit courses at the high school. But over the course of this year, we have received a lot of parent phone calls because we do have accelerated and enriched classes in 5th grade and in the middle school. And this middle section of this policy states, you know, how you will start looking at procedures to guide students and parents of, in order to make decisions of how to place students in higher level courses. So when reading that, parents have confused it. It's not clearly stated that that is only high school. Now in the sections below, it is clearly stated for high school because it's advanced placement courses. But in this section, it's not. And so in order to address a statement here where it said on line 19, the school will honor all parent requests, the process at the high school is still the same process. If you want to override for an AP course or dual credit, dual enrollment course, that is still in place. But to have this statement, we wanted to ask for a revision to have that the school will review all parent requests. This is because of the middle schools, the elementary schools. And the main reason for that is not to say that we're taking away anybody's voice in that. It's because when you have a parent request for certain courses, there are rubrics, there's data that is used in order to identify students.
And I'll clarify, staffing too is also the issue. So this always happens at the high school. It may happen with my son this year. He signed up for Mechatronics 2, which is a dual enrollment course. And the reality is if they don't have enough students sign up for that course, it doesn't matter if I as a parent want this course or not. We won't provide it as a district because we do have to make staffing decisions based on student interest. If we don't have enough interest, then the courses get phased out. So no, it's not a philosophical change that we're requesting here. We're just saying the reality of the process is you don't always get to have exactly the courses based on student interest.
But what you're saying is that the parents would still have the ability to say that if that
Override.
course is available, we want the override. So should we put, is there a way to word it, one, that we distinguish between high school and middle school if there's an issue with that? And then to further define it, for, you know, to say that it's based on, you know, class availability. You know, I mean, if there's not a class available, then by default, even if you want it, you can't have it. Just to know if there's more wording that could make it a little bit more clear in what we're trying to do.
I think the wording as it is really opens the door for more questions than answers. I started listing questions. It says, who will review and make the final decision? Who is considered the school? And if the parent doesn't like the decision made, who do they appeal to? I just think it's very ambiguous. And the more that you can say in the elementary and middle school environment, this, and in the high school, this.
That's really procedures.
That's more procedure.
So
However, they have no policy to fall back on. A parent can say, you know, my child needs to be in XYZ class. The school says, well, we've reviewed that, and they don't. And then they go back to policy, and policy says review. It doesn't say honor.
Or does it say there's a procedure in place? Because I think there's some.
Yeah,
I think
that's listed here
you need a
on line
procedure.
5 that there
On
are
line 5?
procedures developed. Each school develops procedures to guide students, parents, teachers, guidance counselors, and administrators. So there are procedures in place.
And it
I just
defines
wanted this
in
to be
detail.
a true statement.
Yes.
And right now, we can't say that it's a true statement because not all parent requests are honored based on the rubrics that are developed each semester for those math classes at middle school.
So is the issue more middle school or high school?
No, this is a high school issue. This is not meant to apply to middle school.
Right, but she
Well,
said
but
it
I
should
think
This is a high school policy.
So
But
first,
it
should we
has
say
been-
that? I mean, does this need to apply to the middle school? So should we first just say?
That's where the confusion came in.
And that's what
So
I'm trying to
that's
say.
why
So
we're
if we
trying
if we could clean up that confusion by clarifying, one, does there need to be a separate policy as it relates to middle school and a separate policy for high school, or just separate sections within this policy so that we can make it clearer to what we're talking about, first of all, and then second of all, I agree, you know, what you're talking about with the review and that but I don't necessarily know that the procedures mentioned up above talk about it, somehow referencing that if parents, you know, have a concern, who do they go to? Just so we can help them map out, who do you go to when you read a policy if you're not happy with what the course selections are? This is the policy that you would follow or the procedure you would look to. And maybe, I mean, I just think the clearer we can make it, the better.
I was just, I mean, I
But
just.
that would be in the procedure that the schools have. where
Which
they would
each school
outline-
develops.
Which each school develops, and it would be different at the high school than it would be at the middle school.
Exactly, that's what I'm first saying, should we break this out between high school and middle school?
Or should we say, in the middle school, or in the high school, the high school shall communicate the specific procedures to parents, and start that paragraph with the high school, so that they
Yeah.
understand that that follows that the high school must follow that policy.
I would not, because I think we still have to follow this for middle school.
Okay.
And I think
So it
it's-
isn't just a high school, it is.
Because we do have Algebra 1, for example,
In the middle school.
Right.
at the middle school.
Well, I know, I've had to sign.
And so you'd have to have another process for, another policy for the middle
Okay.
school. So
So-
we should be able to craft a policy that honors this and understand our stance with this policy is drastically different than everybody else in the state. It is not common to have override processes for parents. So the fact that we do have an override process is something that we are trying to be accommodating. All we're trying to do is change the language of honor versus review, and the fact that we don't want to have to spell out all the reasons. That's why you can't craft a policy that spells out every little detail. I don't think we have to say for staffing issues or for only if it applies to an enriched course. I think we need to have something that does allow some flexibility. Know that, yeah.
So is there, so are you saying but is there a procedure that spells that out?
Yes, at all of our schools, there are specific
But
procedures.
those procedures potentially can change in view of the change in policy. Because this is a change in policy, as from honor to review.
No, this statement has not been accurate
Okay.
in policy, so that's why I wanted to make this an accurate statement, because
Inaccurate
you
in middle
cannot
school.
override.
In high
right.
school also.
You cannot override at middle school the accelerated course. That is for those extremely top-level students for math.
Okay.
There is a rubric in place. It is decided based on the data that's available, and the cut score is normed with all the students within our district. So-
Same too, you can't override APEX courses. Those are defined by special education, that what qualifies as someone as being gifted. So
Right,
I
which is
think
all
we.
middle school. So are
And
there-
elementary also. So
Absolutely.
like someone can't say, I want my child to be an APEX even though they don't qualify for that program.
Which I
So-
think makes complete sense, but at the high school level, is it fair to say that all overrides are, if
If the course
classes-
makes.
If the
That's a
course
good
is
question.
there, is there an override?
Denied?
If-
I don't think so.
If a parent on the review, and the reason is staff or not enough students in the classroom, the parent is, we explain to the parent why.
Yes.
Correct. So it's not a big mystery if they just get a no, your child cannot be in
Yes, but
quantum
we
mechanics.
do not deny, because philosophically, I agree with the parents. I want kids to challenge themselves.
Right.
And
But
even
if
if they
we
don't
can't
succeed in an
provide-
AP course, or they don't succeed in an honors course,
They're
they
better
have
for it.
Right.
expanded themselves. They have challenged themselves and done some more rigor. So I don't think it's the philosophical
I don't think we have
versus the
any
practical.
issue, I don't think we have
Right.
any issue philosophically. My concern, again, is when, maybe not tomorrow, or maybe not next year, but in a couple of years, if we have a different leadership principle that comes in and says, I don't think parents should have this kind of control, and according to policy, they don't have to. Because all we have to do is review. We don't have to honor in the high school.
And
I just think
my
it
caveat
opens a
would-
door.
My caveat would
that
be
I'm not
that
comfortable
that's
with.
why we have district administration. And that's why you have a superintendent who has the same philosophy as you, who believes that we want to challenge children.
And that's why you review these policies on a yearly basis.
So if, for example, the board, and that's a good point, Ms. Parker, if this becomes a problem, we could change it. We can flip it right back. I don't predict that's going to be the case. Like I said, we aren't denying overrides at the high school.
I get, well, I guess just my concern is, not concern, my question is, then why can't we just spell that out? Why can't we say for middle school, the middle school will review all parent requests, period. The high school will honor all parent requests if staffing is available.
Dr. Park,
I think that I would be comfortable with that.
since each school has its own developed procedures, do you review, are those reviewed on an annual basis?
We assist those procedures for elementary, middle, high school. We sit down and discuss with them prior
And
to.
it's in line with policy?
Every year.
Every year.
On the earlier, on line 17, schools shall communicate the specific procedures to parents during the second semester. Second semester is kind of a long period of time. Is there a way to narrow that down to by the end of the third quarter, or is there a reason that we opened it to
Yes.
everywhere from January to May?
Yes, because we have to look at the student enrollment. It's when they're doing the enrollment process for the
Okay.
next school year. So when they're, it really, we need to give that school that flexibility because, you know, they start meeting with the English classes. The counselors sit with all of the kids one-on-one, and they take those sheets home, they fill them out, and they bring back the course request. So that window is not something that's hard to find. It's that course enrollment process that they're doing second semester for the next year.
Right.
So the actuality is it doesn't help to do this at the beginning of the school year because they're already enrolled in the classes, the courses are already set. That's why we're saying in that spring semester, that's when we're reviewing these and saying, here's what's going home to parents, here's the
And they
communication.
may have changes in the summer. Once they get everything together, they may find in the summer that class may not make it.
Mhm.
Well, and this has to deal with specific procedures, well, what the procedures are, not whether or not a course makes.
Right. So
It's what you
this
do
is-
to go
yeah,
do your
this is
process,
supposed to
just like
align
in
with
your
the
courses.
registration process.
Right.
So our expectation is that every single time that we're sending these home to parents and they're trying to figure out what they're doing, that they're getting a piece of paper that says, but if you don't agree with this or you want your child to be in a more rigorous course, here's the override process form.
And so part of the rubric on just looking at the advanced and accelerated math courses, and part of the discussion that we have is we've got to have time to get those benchmark scores in from the second benchmark. And so when you take it right before exams in December, you don't have a chance at the very beginning of the second semester to look at those scores and pull in grades and everything else. So this gives time to say, okay, here's the rubric, here's how it's set up, here's where we're looking at
That's
making the
fair.
cut scores. So that's why I changed it from asking to change it from the very beginning of second semester,
And that's more impacted in the middle school as well.
elementary and middle.
Elementary, middle.
And you don't do course requests at the high school until you start going through the enrollment process.
Right.
open
And so
enrollment.
so these would always be done before the enrollment process?
Yes, because we're going to send home that, you know, the colored paper that hopefully you sat with your kids and go through. That's when we're going to do that same process.
Ms. Parker, do you have any questions?
No. It seems to me there's a lack of clarification in regards to procedures and policies. We just do the policies and superintendent, his staff are in charge of the procedures.
And they work with the principals at each school to develop this.
So, that's all.
That's right.
Thank you. Anything else?
I still remain uncomfortable with the wording, but that will be what it will be.
Well, and that's just to make sure that we state here that if there is ever an issue, that anybody feels uncomfortable and they're not getting what they need to feel free to come to the district
Right.
office, right?
Which is a message we continually try to encourage our parents.
We just need to change that culture.
Same people we go to from the beginning, so.
All right, next, English learners.
So for the
Excuse me,
English.
y'all, I'm really
Yeah.
losing my voice.
So for the English learners policy, you'll see 2 revisions requested here on line 13. This is just where we felt like we needed to put in the language that goes along with the revised English learner program handbook that the state has developed. and recently published. And so you'll see that we have changed line 3 to state, instead of educationally sound, it is a state-approved instructional service delivery model. That's the consistent language that's in the English language program handbook. And the second edition is, this is on lines 21 and 22. This is in complete line with ESSA. It was in line with No Child Left Behind. This is part of the Title III, or English Learner Requirements, that all communication shall be communicated in a language and method that the parent can best understand. We just did not have that in policy before, and we wanted to make certain that that was in policy, so it does align with ESSA and Tennessee's ESSA plan.
Very good. Any questions?
No.
Okay, moving right along.
And
Testing programs.
Testing programs. So this is a fun topic lately. Hopefully, we are still very optimistic that at some point we will get this all worked out as a state. But we know that I can't brag enough about how our schools, our test coordinators, our teachers, and our students have handled all of the issues that we've faced throughout this process. At our last board meeting, we had just started the testing process, and we were a little lucky because other districts had run into issues, and we started a little bit later so they could work out those few kinks at that time. But I've just passed out to you a collection of some of the issues that we dealt with as a district, just because I wanted you to see these. We had Diane Stovall, our district test coordinator, collected these from all of our building test coordinators, and you can just see the issues that we ran into on a consistent basis throughout the testing process, not just online issues, but paper, pencil as well, and general issues are listed on the back. So we've had a lot to overcome the last few weeks. Our students have been amazing, our families have been understanding, and we cannot thank them enough for all of the support that they have given us. We do have data to use this year based on our benchmark data, and I am so proud of the growth that we've seen, and I told the assistant principals that today, at every level. So we've seen our students grow, we've seen our teachers grow and really rise to the challenge to meet our AMO and double AMO targets based on our benchmark data. And then we've seen our administrators deal with adversity such as this and be able to move forward. And it's a testament of the mindset that we have here in Germantown Municipal Schools of how no matter what, we're still going to try to do our best. And so we're really proud of having that mindset, and even the data not counting, or that is being held harmless to our students and teachers are held harmless from the data. We want to get the data back just to see what it is, and to see if it aligns with what we've seen throughout the year with our students. But then what we want to make certain with the requested revision on the testing programs is that we align it with the legislation that was passed throughout the issues going on with testing. And on lines 23 and line 3 on the back, or on the second portion of it, these are requests because the legislation stated that districts could count it anywhere between 0 and 15%. We want it to count 0%. Legislation says hold harmless, and that's what we intend to do. So we want to request that revision, and in order, I think this is line item 3 on the agenda, but I'm going to go ahead since I'm here. And we would like to waive the second reading if possible, because the need is to have this passed now to let our parents know that it is not going to count against the student's grade.
It was a welcome.
Yes.
It was very welcome. Any questions?
With all these issues, even getting the data back, how accurate do you feel it'll be?
I don't
I know
know.
That's a guesstimate.
I don't know. It just depends. I think the issues on the paper, I think the adults tried to compensate to take care of those issues as much as possible. The online issues at the high school, that's a whole different story. Those were right in the student's face. It was something that you could not overcompensate. I mean, you could not recover from some of those. Right. The ones that are listed here for the paper, a lot of that was organization and having to route students based on what their accommodations were and how to work it with the different versions of the test. So I think the high school will have a bigger difference of what could have been versus what actually was.
Okay.
But they did their very best dealing with the situation.
Well, thank you to you,
Yeah.
all of your hard work to get
Yeah, your
get us
team.
through this season.
And all your testing
And
coordinators.
yes,
Yes, coordinators are,
the coordinators are amazing.
yes, they have been very patient,
And I loved honoring them on the way that we honored them on
Diane
Facebook and
Stovall
recognized them. That was wonderful.
that's her idea, and she's right there with them every step of the way, and it's a good partnership that we know what they've been dealing with, so they will
Excellent.
also get to have a dinner together.
Ms. Parker, any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. If there are no further questions, let's go into discussion of benefits. Mr. Hadow.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
How are you guys? The benefits, this is Bob Shoup and Brittany Spratling. They work for ESP, which is outside of Nashville. They've been our consultants all along. They proposed something that had my attention, and I'm just basically keeping you informed. Right now, there is a bid to look at pharmacy cost, pill management is what they're looking at for us. And they're thinking that it can save us potentially $120,000. It may cost $23,000 to participate based on what they first sent me. But I just wanted to inform you that we're looking into it. If you ask, hey, how long will this take? It will not cost us anything until we
would
sign a
have to award the
contract.
bid.
So yeah, it's got to go out to bid. So before we do any move, I'm going to run that by you again. But right now, the process has been, I've sent them notification, hey, let's go for the bid and see what we can come up with. And to give you more detailed information, it really is they call it a prescription benefit management program. And I think that they work with a particular manager to go after cost of generic drugs. And apparently from what was quoted is that generic drug may be costing us $12, but that manager may be able to get it at a more reduced rate. And that's where the savings would come into play.
And that actually is a big portion of what we're spending with our health insurance costs. When we look at the drugs that people are taking, we actually have to look at those forms to see, could they have taken a generic versus, one of the main brands.
Do we have, just out of curiosity, do they, or does our insurance, since I don't have it, are they required to do mail-in on theirs? Because some.
No, I do not believe they were.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Some are required to do 3-month mail-in, and you can't
No.
purchase it.
Yes.
Right, no,
Without that.
of course.
Okay, I was just curious.
Any questions on that? It's a real, I'm not trying to be rude, but it's a real.
I'm glad
Nice
you're able to be
job.
proactive. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hadow. Mr. Jones, let's talk budget.
You all should have a packet of budget information. It should be a summary of changes, the general fund budget, as well as the other funds budget. And I thought what I'd do for the second reading of the general fund budget is just go through the changes.
Exciting.
Starting out with revenues, we received our first BEP payment or estimate with additional funding of $858,000. Again, that number may change. The final estimate will be received in July. Municipal property taxes, the city increased their maintenance of effort by $22,000.
I know you said this is just our initial from the
Yeah.
DEP. Do you think it could go up?
Historically, it's gone up just a little bit.
But know that this isn't set in stone, that we'll have to do revisions again, as we go through this process, because we do have to, because of the city's ordinances, start the budget process before we have our
So are we.
finalized BEP.
Well, we
Right.
didn't
We
receive
have-
Shelby County until
We have
July.
3 more readings with the city.
Yeah.
So just to go through some of the highlights, we have built in, hopefully you see, the 2%. Remember, that was one of the things that we said if we received more money. Other than that, we didn't try to allocate the money except for some small changes. We really try to just put it in pots or pockets till we get and see where are we finally going to end with these allocations. Because that big list that I shared with you and also with the FAC about those big costs coming in the future, we kind of were just in a holding pattern. So I said, let's just be conservative and not truly allocate it. So except for these smaller changes that you see here, most of the money we put into capital, and we put it into instructional supplies because of the new school. I think that summarizes most of the big,
Well, and then the additional 1% COLA.
yes.
No, which is the part that's exciting.
Right, so that
I'm
the
glad.
staff are projected to receive a step increase plus a 2% COLA.
Excellent.
So my understanding is that, the 351, that's the step increase. Or
Yes.
the increase in pay that we were.
That takes us from the
hopeful, and
1% to
that
the
We're all
2%.
excited about that,
Yep.
so yes. But the remaining amount you've distributed amongst these different,
So if you see the big
Groups.
categories like building construction, for
Yes.
example, we're just putting a big chunk of funding into building
so,
construction as a
so
place.
where does, when you said, that we have the wish list, so
We-
at what point do we go back and readdress the wish list from that?
I think that's part of our conversation that we need to have. I don't
Okay.
think we've gone through and talked about which items were priority. We just have a big wish list.
Okay.
This wasn't an attempt to do that. This was just to say, let's put it in a placeholder until we
Okay,
do that.
so
I
would that be something we discuss at the retreat, or when would be the next
Or
step?
maybe the next work session.
I would say
at
when we
6
get ready to
June.
do our, I don't know, that's a good question.
Because I would really.
'Cause we wanna do that
I'm
before the
excited
third
about
reading.
Yes.
the possibility of
Yeah,
what
'cause
we
there's
can
a
do
lot of
with
great
this.
things.
I would say,
on
I would
this.
say before that third reading, because we'll be closer to,
Knowing that
yes,
this
the
is a
final
number.
DEP.
Yeah.
We'll
Number,
have to
'cause-
probably do a special work session, don't you think?
Yes.
Okay.
And plus, we've gotten some indication of additional county dollars.
Okay.
Okay,
That won't be finalized until July, but that's about an additional $329,000.
Excellent.
and that would hopefully maybe also at that point, we might,
By the 18th.
okay. But
Yeah, so-
does the 18th need to be our third reading?
I would say let's talk about it, the work session prior to that. I think the biggest thing for us and the reason we wouldn't want to rush in is you don't want to make that hard decision between two items on that list, because those are all great items you saw on the
Absolutely.
list. If we didn't have to. And so, for example, if the county commission is going to come in with additional dollars, then I think we would avoid
Well, is
some
the county money?
painful decisions we might not have
And
to
I'm
make.
thinking if we wait till June the 18th, we have a greater chance of knowing.
That's correct.
Harder numbers, right, it's firmer
But
numbers.
will that be, so just playing devil's advocate here, if we get to that point and we're looking at it, so you're saying we would talk about what that priority is on
Yes.
June 18th, but then have to vote on it as a third reading and final budget before the end of the
Or-
fiscal year?
Or we can do it as a budget amendment. It's really up to your
Yeah,
choice.
we can do the budget amendments in
Okay,
July.
okay,
So we
We've
can-
done that
Okay,
in the past
okay.
because
So that's not an issue to.
okay.
I just want to make sure.
We have some
we're-
flexibility.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's
hopefully
what
by
I'm-
then, we should know a little bit more about what the city is doing.
Yes,
Um,
because we're
when
supposed to have a joint retreat.
Are we going to have one?
I don't know.
That's a big question.
Is there any way that we could formally request that? Because I mean, it seems to me like there's a lot of communications coming out that,
There's been
as
the
an individual.
conversation about it, but.
Okay, but there's been a lot of communication out that surprises me as a board member of what the city's saying, that I'm not aware of any of the conversations, is that, and I don't know if that's because that's what the executive committee is having conversations? Okay, so then I think that the public is seeing that. So there's an assumption that we as a board are okay with what they're saying, and I don't know that that's okay. I think we should make a public request for a meeting, versus just a phone call. I don't know. I don't know how we get on the same page. How do we get together with the BMA and say, this is what we really need, and this is what we're hearing? It's okay, just tell us what we're gonna get so we can move forward.
Are you primarily referring to the mayor's most recent? Because
Yes.
that's just the city's direction.
That's
how the
you're
city's
talking about the
going.
additional capital dollars that they want to.
Well, the email that he sent, that I sent today, that went into very details about the money that they're giving us, and that they said that the Riverdale boiler is gonna be given to us 1.5 million this year, or next year's budget and then the following year. There's no mention of school safety, there's no mention of dogwood. I mean, I think that, to me, it came across as pretty final. I mean, if you're a layman citizen and you don't know the exact process that the budget goes through, you would read that and say, that's what the school's getting. And so my concern is, we as a school board should be aware of what's being talked about. And I do think that
Part of the conversation.
yeah, and I think that we're a strong enough school board to be able just to say, we need a meeting. I mean, you tell us when to be there, whether we can extend one of their executive sessions for 30 minutes to go in and talk to them about what's in their budget. At least they're already scheduled, they're there, we could come to them. I mean, something, but I think an official email from our chairman requesting that with everybody copied saying, we need a meeting.
Did most of this come through the FAC?
My understanding, because I've attended pretty much every FAC, is that this level of detail was not discussed in the FAC of changes. I've listened to all the meetings. I haven't seen it or read it or heard it, because all you can do is hear the audio. You can't watch it, so you can just hear and you don't get the handouts. It could have very well been, but not to my knowledge for all the meetings that I've attended.
Right, so like I've told you all, the conversations that we were having
Yes.
With the city administration was they were trying to look for a way to get all of our projects funded.
Over 5 years,
Over
right?
5
Which is
years. So they were
perfect.
taking that list and they were looking and seeing how could we get everything accomplished. And so what they're building in some assumptions.
Okay, you're back on.
They're building in the fact that can you hear us?
Lisa?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're talking about the city and communication that went out about funding projects that they were going to approve. And so we were discussing having a meeting with them, and I was just giving an overview of conversations that we had previously had with city administration. So
I didn't lose too much of that conversation.
okay, good. So what we were talking about is we were sitting down and they were trying to come up with a way to get all the projects funded over 5 years. So they're looking at the fact that we receive approximately $1 million from Shelby County every year, and that we have built into our budget approximately $1.5 million. And so they're trying to make the assumption that there's 2.5, and any projects that go above that, what they're going to do is come alongside and try to support those big projects. And they said that they were looking at how could they use bonds, or how could they use their general revenue to accomplish those projects. So the Riverdale, for example, they mentioned that one way that they could get that accomplished was to fund it over 2 fiscal years. So they said that if they provided $1.5 million one year and then 1.5 the next, that means in June and July that we would be doing the project. Excuse me. That's how they would fund it. And so they were looking at bigger projects, bigger bonds. And so that's how far we got in the discussion.
Right.
And when was that discussion?
We've had a couple of meetings. Excuse me. I couldn't tell you the exact dates. I was meeting with Mr. Heisman.
Okay, with the,
with the administration of the city.
Mr. Kathy, you can chime in.
Sounds like I need to chime in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds to me like we just need to maybe just push a little harder to be able to
And I
sit
do
down
not
with
have a
them.
problem sending an
Okay.
email and asking for a meeting, because when I read the article, I was in the same boat you were.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly,
knew
yeah.
I think we all.
Part
I
of
think
it.
we all are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm not saying we are,
I
I think that's
But I
just
do
part of the
think we
process.
did present them a list, and I think they picked what they
Right.
saw.
Well,
they
but
could help
I don't
with.
know that, again, that's just an article. Is that really what's been picked? And
Well, remember,
we don't
none of
know.
it's final.
I understand that, but I think the bigger question is, when will we know, and how will it be communicated, and can we have a discussion? Because I'll be honest with you, I think we are a significant part of the city and the budget and have an impact, and I think
Almost
that
40%.
having our board sit down with the BMA and not having that middleman of the FAC, I think
have
is a
no
better
problem with that.
conversation. And I think that that's just, I mean, I think to that point,
Well, I think Ms. Liner said she would,
I think
she
that would
has
be
been in
great.
touch with them. and
I don't
she
know
will
if
continue
Wednesday's
following
work
up.
session with the BMA would accommodate that or not, or are you looking
Yeah.
for something more formal?
I
well,
think
that's
we-
more, I think, operating is what, I mean, I'm going to that, but I mean, I think that's more the operating piece that that they're talking about, not so
think-
much the CIP fund.
I think what we need is similar to what we did last year.
Yes.
Is an evening meeting between the two boards and the two administrations. so that we can sit down, we can ask our questions, they can ask, because we did present our priority items, our priority CIP items at the FAC meeting, and safety primarily, which was a very important, dollars was not on there.
Right.
Now, I don't know if that was part of the discussion, or if there, I know the feeling is that I'm just from that FAC and some conversation afterwards, that perhaps there could be a grant for that there possibly could be a grant.
My discussions with the city were with Jason Heisman, and we presented our 5-year master facilities plan along with the 3 priority items that the board identified, the Riverdale boiler and chiller, safety, and Dogwoods ADA upgrades, and we said, these are needs. Now, what happened from there, that wouldn't be a question that I could answer. All I can say is, we put the needs out there and said, here are the needs that the district has, here's what's in the master facilities plan, here are the 3 items that the board identified.
Right, which I think is all we can do,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
it is
that's-
all we
yeah.
can do.
Until we sit across the table from them and
Right.
really have a meeting of minds.
Right.
And
So
then-
I will take care
Thank
of
you.
that.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kathy, one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
This year, we're doing the HVAC at Farmington.
Correct.
And are you using funds that we're getting, that we got from Shelby County last year to
That's
accomplish
correct.
that?
That is
Yes.
absolutely correct.
So we will then be getting
Funds.
still the funds from Shelby County for the.
For this next fiscal year, that's correct.
Which have been somewhat.
Any other
designated
questions?
for-
Ms.
yeah.
Parker, you have any
Already said.
questions? Yeah.
No, I have no questions.
Okay.
So what
I
you're,
have lots of comments, but I have no questions.
Well, I think part of it is we've made our presentation to the FAC.
that's right.
And then, separate presentation, the conversation that our administration had with their administration.
And really,
It's
it was
two
just
separate presentations.
Reviewing the plans that y'all have already
Right.
seen,
That we
the 5-year
said.
We'd already said.
5-year plan.
Right.
So, but I will get with the superintendent, and we will send a letter to the mayor, email to the mayor, and to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and request that we have a joint meeting
That'd be great. What you're saying,
to discuss
Superintendent-
budget only.
Right,
Right.
is, these items here don't get too caught up in their designations yet, until we meet again.
That's
To
correct. Well,
kind of, to
I would-
leave them
I would say the big items, I know that Mr. Jones was looking at some minor areas, and I think he was working with all of the cabinet members, but I'll give you an example of,
Should be under construction and other
well,
capital.
not on construction, just on the budget. You were asking about the general budget, correct, or were you talking about capital?
No, I was talking about the general budget.
Just
So
these
I was
items.
just- I
So,
was
yes, so
talking
we're
about
off,
here.
we're off the capital, and so we're back on.
I'm sorry, I was just, yeah,
Yes.
just kind of circling back to this one.
So I'll give you, for example, there's been a change to the OPEB contribution. It's actually less based on the actuary. That's not a change that I would say that we would adjust. TSBA dues and memberships to be part of that.
Right.
So a lot of the small ones, I would not say that. The workers' compensation, that's actually less, so that's not.
It's based on
Right.
the
So
renewals.
there are smaller changes that he had. There were some substitute cost. I would say that we would need to, it would be my recommendation to leave substitute cost. That was always a budget line item that Dr. Park was, and the schools were monitoring closely. And it's always a really tight budget. So it was their request to go ahead and put that amount of money in there just as a cushion to make sure, based on the past year's performance. So there's some,
Yeah,
yes,
My big question was when you look at the list we had.
Right.
Compared to the total that we have, there's about $525,000 that we're putting in different line items that don't reflect the
Right.
things on here.
So
And so
the
when we had
majority,
that big of a
yes.
number, I was just wanting to make sure that there were, two questions. First of all, was one, were there some items on here that would take priority over maybe something that's on here?
yes.
And then second, it seems like, and I'm not saying any of this stuff on here isn't needed, because I
Right.
mean, the substitute costs are very important. But it's more, are there other things, just because we're in such a tight budget process?
Right.
That didn't make this list and aren't on this list that might pop up and say, ooh, because we get another, I'm just making this up,
Right.
another $100,000, we really would put it here. So, I mean, I'm
Right.
just,
I would
what I'm saying?
not, I would not predict that's the case.
Okay,
Most of these
okay.
adjustments that you see are small, and they're just
Okay.
cleaning up where things are
Okay,
accounted
so
for.
the big items where they maybe come up with like the 500,000 will be coming back to this bigger list.
Right, so for
Okay.
example, the 297 for building construction, the 56,000 for capital outlay, and the extra money for instruction, those are the placeholders, so we're really talking that
Perfect.
500,000, those would be pockets of money that I would say when
And
this,
we'll come back to
when
the
this
list and
board
talk
is
about
ready
it.
to make those decisions on those,
And then if you wanted to, the additional revenue from the county. to add
Right,
that to it.
exactly, kind of true all that stuff up
That's right.
together. Okay.
and
Okay.
then whether it's a priority for those items that those unfunded ones that we talked about,
Right.
I think that's when we get the really hard
To that
decisions.
discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Unfortunately, it does, we don't know. The county
No,
doesn't give us a
absolutely.
final
Yeah.
figure until July.
That's why I think
so
a
until we
budget
have
amendment
that,
might be more appropriate in July.
yeah, once we have the
Just,
final dollars.
we'll have the final BEP number as well as the number from the
And we
county,
can discuss it in July.
So
whatever you want to do.
Yes.
That works. I think it would make more sense to wait until we have final numbers to have the conversation. Personally,
I agree.
I'm good with
I agree. I'd rather
I'm
have,
very
I don't
comfortable
think
with
it's to discuss it and we don't have final dollars.
It's
Right.
just gonna change
Right.
again.
then you're
as
just
long as-
guessing, yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
that's
let's
very
do
fair.
that. Ms. Parker, you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Let's move on to the federal capital cafeteria health insurance.
Ms. Crowder.
and OPEB budgets.
Ms. Crowder has a PowerPoint presentation, and then
It's
each
a
cabinet
mouthful.
member
There ought
will
to be
present their part of the other fund's
to make one
budget.
of
So
those.
Dr. Park's going to lead off.
there ought to be an acronym or something.
We in education love our acronyms.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Lisa, we're going to be Ms. Parker, we're going to be looking at a PowerPoint. Do you want to follow along? Do you want us to call you back when we hit the budget amendment?
No, I'll stay on. Just tell Jason not to cough so much.
Ah, good luck with that. I'm dying here.
Do you want a mint?
I've been feeding him now.
Okay. I didn't know, yeah.
Oh, my purse is up there.
I have
it. Okay.
Just wake me up when you get through.
Okay.
Just please tell us you're not
That's not a
driving.
reflection of all the
She
work.
is not
that-
driving.
She's not driving.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started on the federal projects revenues. You'll see this is a collaboration of a lot of different grants, and so I will cover the first few. I'll cover the Carl Perkins Grant, Consolidated Admin, Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV, and then Ms. Huffman will come and cover the rest for IDEA. What?
Nothing. Keep going.
Okay.
No, keep going.
So, the Perkins Grant, this is what you have seen in the past as being part of shared services. So this is a new area for me, but I want to go through and just explain to you a little bit about the allocation. So the original allocation that we received was that we had to plan for was $50,228. At some point between last night and this afternoon, they changed that allocation. So this is just how it works. I just want to give you a heads up.
Just when you think.
Yeah, so it's now at 57,000, but we will go back again. We'll go through the approval process, and so this is what happens with the federal dollars, because they are only estimating.
Sure.
And they continue to update it so you can plan best for a district. So then this account, you will see that there are budgets, or there's money put aside for the other supplies and materials. This is to go towards industry certifications. There's vocational instructional equipment. This is to add the all-in-one printers for information technology career cluster strand. You will see under other student support, there's money in for travel and in-service staff development. The travel is for student and teachers to attend career and technical student organization related conferences like DECA, HOSA, FBLA, FFA. And then you'll also see that there are in-service staff development. This is for CTE teachers to attend summer CTE conference. There's travel and other charges. Under travel, this is for, under the 72230, this is for the CTE director or CTE lead at the schools to be able to attend any additional meetings. You know, we had discussed previously that there are required meetings every month. And then the other charges for 500, this is part of a federal requirement. You have to run an ad in the newspaper to say what are the career clusters being offered at Houston High School, and that ad typically costs $500. So that's what you will see in that area for the other charges. And then the indirect costs just can go back to the district to cover any additional costs from operating this budget. Okay, so we'll move to the next one, Consolidated Administration. This is where we pull funds in from our Title I, Title II, Title III budgets. And so this is where we operate those positions at the district level. So in this area, and these are no new positions, this is what we've currently had in place, clerical or financial secretary or admin in that role. We have 2 FTEs for other salaries and wages. We have an 11-month federal programs coordinator who focuses primarily on Title I with the additional funds and compliance we have there. And then we have a 12-month consolidated admin federal programs coordinator who really focuses in on our Title III and assists with Title I and our non-public share that we have to have for our private schools. And within this budget, you will see they have travel mileage to go between schools, other supplies and materials, in-service staff development to attend, legal conferences for federal programs like the National Title I Conference, TESOL conference for English language learners, and then there's other equipment if needed for these positions to operate.
And I will clarify, what's strange about all these budgets is the little amount of control that this board has over them, or the district.
Right.
You know, we receive the federal requirements. They tell us not only here's the money, but they also have to approve how we're spending it. So we go through this process of them approving how all these items are spent. And you have to have the right balances, and Dr. Parker, her team spent a lot of time making sure that you can't have too much in one account. We got to make sure we're not supplanting what we were doing in the school system. So
I think we kind of mentioned this last summer when we talked about the additional funds that we were getting as a district. It's great to have all of these extra funds, but as our schools are finding out, you are very limited in the red tape that goes along with spending these funds, and everything has to be tied back to the federal guidance and the purpose for this fund or these budgets here. So what we do is we go through the process. They tell us how much we have as a district. We submit our plans to the state. The state has to approve the funds, and then they come in and monitor us regularly. So, and then they monitor what we have in the E-Plan as our funding application. So we just try to find the best way to meet the needs of the district. We have to complete a comprehensive needs assessment every year that includes student data, that includes our human capital report, it includes every area for the district. So they really limit what we can spend our funds on. So for Title 1A, you will see, and these are just our best guesses because, again, these are just estimated allocations that the state has given us, but this is what we are going with. We currently have 2 interventionists funded through Title I. We have one at Riverdale and we have one at Houston High School. Those will remain. Other salaries and wages, this is where you'll see tutoring that our schools can offer. We have stipend positions for teachers at the school to work extra to do the family engagement piece, to have the Title I parent meetings that are required. So that's where you'd see those wages, and then the fringe benefits that go along with those salaries and wages. The next section, contracts with other school systems. This is something that's new this year that we did not have last year. This is where we will have to develop a formal agreement with Shelby County because they are serving some of the students who would be zoned to go to our schools. And because those private schools that they are attending are not in Germantown, then we have to work with the school district that hosts or has those private schools. And Shelby County is the one who does that. So that's where that amount comes from. That is required. That is not negotiable. So you'll see that's a pretty large amount, but we have to do that. Other contracted services, this is where some of the schools have requested to bring in speakers, authors, or to have technical setup for any of the technology that they purchase. And with that, that means outside of what our district can normally provide, or it's in such a large amount of a purchase that we don't currently have the staff to be able to do that. Instructional supplies and materials, these are supplemental resources that are available for the schools. Then you will see there's a separate line item for that, which is the $400. We are required to have a homeless set aside, so any supplies needed for homeless students, we're required to put money aside for that. And then regular instruction equipment, again, this is technology typically is what our schools tend to purchase. Other student support, other contracted services, this is for, we have $100 set aside for homeless, and then we have non-public family engagement required funds. And again, under that same area, other charges, that is our family engagement funds. So these are funds that the federal government says that we have to put aside based on what our total allocation is per school, because they are really promoting family engagement. So what we anticipate seeing as we come up is, you know, any literacy nights that you have at the school or math nights that you have, you could purchase materials to have families come to the school, get really involved in what the curriculum is, and it helps show the parents what's happening in the classroom, but it also gives them something that they can walk away with and work with their students at home. The support regular instruction, you'll see other salaries and wages there. This is where we approved and had set aside money for instructional coaches paid out of federal. We hired one math coach for this current school year, and the success we've seen with that has been amazing. The problem with that is we know it's a federally funded position that once we lose all of this money, it's going to be something that we will need to look at in terms of sustaining it. So instead of going full force with all of the subject areas that we'd requested last year, for this year we are adding just the science coach position, and this is going to be instrumental as we move into the new textbooks and as we have the new standards. This person will help be an extension within the schools, and you'll see the wages located there. Then underneath that, you'll see travel mileage, that's between schools, other supplies and materials. This is for these instructional coaches. In-service staff development, all of that's not for 2 instructional coaches, that's $289,000. So that is for all of the schools, what they've put aside for the staff development and in-service, which is an amazing amount that provides a lot of opportunities for our teachers. And then the other equipment just goes along with those instructional coaches. So Title II, Title IIA is for professional development and growing teachers and leaders within the schools. So our Title IIA budget is really cut this year. Of course, when we have carryover, we'll come back with a revised amount just from what's not spent this year. We have on other salaries and wages, it's actually 0.45 FTE that you'll see that's coming out of Title II, so we need to correct that amount because the other part's paid out of district. So there's not enough money to cover the salary and provide additional opportunities for the schools and to bring in a speaker. But you'll see that that's a portion of the salary there. Then other contracted services, this is where we pay for speakers to come in on DLD day, and then any additional speakers that we bring in throughout the year. Other supplies and materials, these are just for, in general, professional development opportunities hosted within the district. We can pay for supplies and materials through that account. And then in-service staff development, a portion of this total amount here goes to the non-public schools. It just does not have to be separated in this budget. But then the remaining piece goes to us as a district to send any additional teachers to any in-service or staff development. And then we have our indirect costs there as well. Title III, this is our English learners group, and we have this divided up between 3 main areas. The first one is the regular instruction, instructional supplies and materials. So we have purchased software that allows us to have benchmarking towards our WIDA, which is our English language proficiency exam as the state. And so it's one of our indicators on the accountability model. So we have a benchmark system in now that's called Finish Line that we are working with our students to help give us some data throughout the year. And then you'll see the in-service staff development. This is to send our EL teachers to any state-led conferences, or maybe we can, if there's enough money and the national conference is not as expensive to travel to, then we can rotate who goes to that among the teachers. And then Title IV, this is a grant that we've just received this year. This is to promote well-rounded education. And within this grant, we are able to fund supplies and materials for PE, arts, fine arts areas, And then we can also send teachers to staff development. And this is also where we've supplied some resources for our counselors. So this is where we've pulled in suicide prevention, bullying, additional software and programs that can be used within the schools.
Any questions before Ms. Huffman comes up?
No, great job on that, 'cause it's not easy.
I feel like I could have yelled over from my seat. Use my teacher voice. IDEA Part B are federal funds that cover students from 3 to 21. They can only be utilized with those students that qualify with an educational disability. I'm not going to go into each individual section unless you guys want me to. IDEA preschool is also federal funds, and it's specified to utilize with students that are ages 3 to 5. It is quite small. We did apply for a grant in this area last year, so our preschool is very covered when it comes to instructional supplies and materials. And last, I have the supplemental discretionary grant, and we do not have the number on this yet, so it is to be determined, but I do have the amount that we were given last year, and this is solely to put towards progress monitoring for students on an IEP. And that's it. Any questions?
What was the amount last year?
$43.95.
Thank you.
And we'll update the board once we get that allocation from the federal government.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Kathy?
School nutrition, oh.
Oh, school nutrition.
School nutrition.
No, it's cap.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
different in their books, but that's okay.
Oh. What do you want to do?
It's okay, we'll do school nutrition, all your books.
School nutrition, we've incorporated Aramark's final budget into our document. They're projecting right at $1.2 million in sales, with a transfer coming from the district at a little over $100,000. We're hoping again that that will be zero, just taking a conservative approach. And you'll see in the financial report for April, probably record sales for the cafeteria operation, right at $160,000. So we hope that continues.
Did they change the menu? What drove that?
Everybody's tired of making
Yeah.
lunches.
Mom says I'm done.
Yeah, no more lunches from home, I guess, but
We'll take
yeah, trying to be a little
it.
more creative with
They've
the
been more
menus.
creative with
and-
menus.
That's good.
On the expenditure side of things, the $1.184 million is what we pay Aramark. So they're projecting a profit from their document right at $17,000 for the year. And the other 3 line items are the district expenditures. Any
Questions on
questions?
school nutrition?
Thank you, Mr. James.
Mr. Kathy.
Okay, first thing I can promise you about this budget is that it's not entirely accurate, and the reason it's not entirely accurate is because we're still spending these dollars in this fiscal year. So when we get to the end, June 30th, we'll have a lot better target, but this is our best guesstimate on what this will look like in next fiscal year. So these are the funds that we receive from the city, under county commission funds and bond proceeds are your main 2 areas there. And then you have reserves, and the reserves are, again, a best guess on Shelby County Commission dollars that will roll into next year and then immediately be used in July for projects that we have going on this summer. And we have broken those out by the categories that we feel they're in the ballpark on what we'll spend per architects, building construction, and building improvements. But we won't know a true number until June 30th when we get our final invoices for funds spent this year for the first 2 months of construction on the new elementary school, as well as progress on Farmington's projects, which we're also using Shelby County Commission dollars to fund. So I will be happy to answer any questions about that.
So on page 28, where it shows the bond proceeds,
Yes.
why do we have 28 million in fiscal year 2018 and 22 in 2019?
Let's see, on page 28,
Yes.
I see 23,053,000 on page 28.
For this
That's
year,
just-
Josh, I think you budgeted the entire
Look
contract.
up to, look up to revenues first. You're
Okay.
looking at expenditures.
On page 29, I see revenues.
No, 28.
28.
This
28.
page,
Maybe my numbering's different on here.
There
possibly.
you go. They're asking about FY 18, the bond proceed amounts. Remember, I think you
Got it.
budgeted the
That is
full
correct.
contract amount.
So when I put that in, Kevin's right, that was the full contract amount, but we have already spent 3.1 million on land out of city bond proceeds. We've already spent some of those dollars, so, and we will continue to spend those dollars over the next 2 months. So that's my best guess at what we will have spent in FY 18 from the city bond proceeds.
But not 28 million.
We also got bond proceeds for Dogwood's roof, which would have been a last summer project, and we also had bond proceeds that rolled on the Riverdale project last summer into this fiscal year. We were still paying and still have continued to pay bills on the Riverdale project through this fiscal year.
So it's not just new school project.
Right, so
That's $7
$28 million of bond proceeds?
20, right,
Not for 2019, not for upcoming, but for, in 2000, it's ending in a month and a half. We've received $28 million that we've spent in this year.
No, we haven't spent it, we received it.
and we really don't
That's the
even,
revenue.
and
We
we
don't
really don't
really
even
receive
receive it. Every time I
That's
get it,
right.
I have it.
But-
We do a
But
draw.
it shows down here that we've spent it under building constructions in 21 million. So we've
Yeah,
spent
21
21 million.
That was the budget.
That is
So
that.
when we see actuals come in here, what do we anticipate actuals might be for 2018? Just rough estimate.
So are you talking about actual spent or?
I don't know how you account for it, Kevin.
Yeah, on cash basis accrual.
Okay.
And Josh, what do you think you spent?
I would have to pull it, I couldn't pull it off the top of my head.
That's okay, because when I'm trying to just add it up, and so when you look at this page, if you look at fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2019, you'd think that maybe we're spending $53 million.
No, the
but
reality,
Oh,
is
no.
it's rolling from one year into the
And
other.
I know that, but I don't
Right.
know that this document says that, so I just think that, what I'm just trying to get a feel for is, just making sure that when we get that, we know, because you'll be able to tell kind of year to year how
Right.
much we're spending, and I don't think
It's the
that,
action, yeah.
we didn't spend this 30 million.
No,
No,
And we
that-
will not
You're
have spent
talking
that 30
actual
million.
No.
versus the budget.
That's right, yeah, okay, I just want to make sure, okay,
yes.
sorry, thank you.
No
Any
worries.
other
Any other
questions?
questions?
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Who has health insurance? Mr. Haddock, Mr. Jones?
Mark, can you sit up and stand?
You got it?
Yeah, you can sit if you want to join.
You can sit down, Mr. Head.
No, I'm good. I can stand. I can sit all day. On my end, I did want to share with you some of the, it's been kind of a expensive year with health claims because of some high expense medical items. And some of those have been Crohn's disease and the medicine that goes with that. Others have been breast cancer. I think we have maybe 2 or 3 cases of that. Another one was a blood clot that required some major surgery on an employee. Another one would be a premature baby. I think a baby came at 36 weeks. So you're looking at kind of a unique year in comparison to other years with health costs. So I did want to share that with you. Andrea Pitt is the health cost solutions person. She does send out probably a monthly report, and I did remind her to send me maybe the top 10 health cost claims. Usually she follows up behind that, but I do not have one. I just received it this morning, so I don't have an official report what that looks like. But I did want to inform you where we're on that. We do not foresee, based on Kevin's work, premiums going up, and that is pretty much unheard of. So the previous board and you guys, I take my hat off to you for being self-insured and where we currently are. So thank you.
And we did know from the beginning that we would have good years and bad years.
Yes.
We would like them all to be good.
for everybody concerned.
Yeah.
Mr. Jones?
On the revenue side of the health insurance fund, employee contributions are at 1.6 million. Employer or the district contributions are right at 3 million. That's based on a recent payroll annualized as far as participation. Right now, I believe there are 401 employees participating in the health insurance plan. The other income of $8,000 are Cigna pharmacy rebates that come in. Medical claims incurred, we're averaging about $318,000 a month in claims. So that is annualized to 3.8 million. Stop loss premiums and administrative expenses, those two budget line items are sufficient compared to prior year to remain the same.
Great.
Any
Any
questions? OPEB trust.
OPEB.
On the revenue side, employer contributions, $720,000. That's our actuary's projection for next year's contribution. And this amount equals what's in the general fund budget. Retiree contributions, again, estimated at $50,000. Investment income and unrealized gain or loss at $195,000 combined. Retiree stipends, for those who choose a stipend as opposed to 65 plus coverage, it's $30,000. Retiree medical claims dropped a little bit down to $300,000, and I think that still gives us some cushion based upon what's happening this year. And administrative expenses are paying U.S. Bank plus actuaries. And health and life insurance premiums, those are with Aetna for the 65 plus group.
And is that 140, that's the unrealized gain or loss on investment for the budget year, is that based on the fact that we've just been increasing our investments, our investment dollars are going up, so the return on the investment?
Right, on the 140, I estimated the 7%
Okay. On the current balance?
required actuary rate of return.
Right.
Times 2 million.
Okay. That helps.
Yes.
Yeah.
As we build that
Yes,
bond.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And
I
we're
mean,
sitting
you're
right at,
basically earning money on it, and that's the thought,
Right.
right?
That's
Is
right.
that it's helping you pay for.
So we are preparing for our future boards and
Right.
future district that they won't be saddled with this expensive OPEB cost.
And we're sitting at 2.4 million in the trust now. So.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Any other questions? Thanks, Mr. Jones.
Can you just stay up?
I was gonna say, you might
There's
need
a
to come back up.
Budget amendment next.
Just getting your steps.
Budget
Get
amendment
my
number
exercise.
37, excuse me, 37.
This is just projecting out health insurance expense or the district contributions for a couple of categories, shoring those up for the remainder of the fiscal year under Fund 141, which is the general fund, under 263, shoring up those projections for revenues for employee contributions as well as district contributions, and then, of course, offsetting medical claims.
Any questions?
Making the budget real is
Yes.
the answer. This is where we get to end and
Yes.
those projections like insurance start getting
Oh,
tightened
yeah.
up.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then the next one, audit recommendation, that's right.
Oh, yes, that's you too.
The district's policy on audits requires what I call a turnover audit. If there's a change in staffing for someone that's responsible over the expenditure of funds, so that can be a principal or a financial secretary. With our recent change in principalship at the high school, we've come to you to see if you want to request a special audit. I will mention that Ms. Kinley has done a pre-audit of all the schools So that school has already received some attention. And then we have the regularly scheduled audit happening in July.
So the
Just
question
more
is,
of a
do you
high
want to
level,
roll
not
with
at a
the
school level.
regular
Roll with what
audit
we
in July,
got,
or have
or-
an additional one besides that?
How would it be more in-depth, or what would be the benefit?
It would be the same procedures.
Same procedure as
Yeah.
July?
We'd just be paying for it.
We just will we see the same?
Results, yeah.
Same.
Let me just ask you a question. So if you do that audit, it would just be of the high school?
The high school, yes.
And so that level of detail that audit would give to the high school, you're saying is included in the audit that we will be doing in July? So
Right.
it wouldn't be any difference in the work or the selection or the
Right.
statistical?
And I would say Ms. Kinley's pre-audit is probably more intensive.
Okay.
So if the board is okay with it, I think we're fine with where we
If y'all
are.
are okay with it, then it won't require any action other than.
No special audit.
Unless we,
Well, if it's not any deeper, then I don't
That's
see the
You
benefit.
won't get any other information.
Other than the fact that it's the same time. I mean, had it happened and it was, 6 months ago, then it might.
Then it may be
It
different.
might be a
Right.
different
Right.
story.
That's right.
We're only dealing with
potentially.
the month
A
and a
month
half.
and a half, yes.
Right, exactly.
And Miss Kinley she's very strict.
Yes, she's very good. All year long.
All year
I will
long.
add. Yes, she's making sure, yes,
Not just a one time.
that's right.
no,
She makes
all
sure
year
that
long.
we follow the laws.
Yes.
And I think that it's significant that she just done a pre-audit.
Right.
So that puts us in a good spot. So
Okay. We
If
appreciate
you're-
you bringing that
Thank
up.
Sure.
you for.
if you're okay, then I'd say we just proceed with just
Proceed as
July.
is. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cabot? Mr. McDonald, I don't know if you want to come up also.
Oh, yes, I'm definitely going to evoke his expertise here in just a minute. But this is our renewal for our several different types of insurance. We've got our employer's liability, our general liability, property liability, and our student accident insurance. Page 3 probably is the best summary page on this. Not much movement on the rates. Property did go up $5,524. Workers' compensation $2,133. Liability actually went down $899. Student accident stayed level, and so it was a total increase of $6,758. I did ask Mr. McDonald, we had a conversation about getting an optional liability quote, which we're actually going to bring to you as a recommendation to move our coverage as it relates to errors and omission and liability from $2 million to $5 million. David has some ideas. He'll talk about tort reform and what's covered under that and what's not covered and what is covered under our errors and omissions policy. We have had a good, long-standing relationship with David at Insight Risk Management and the TML. We've had 2 property claims this year that I've been involved with, one being the damages that occurred over at Riverdale over at Christmas break, and also the baseball fencing. And this is one of the things that David does for us. David and I were having a conversation, and we looked at that old baseball fencing that was at Houston High, and I think I told the board at the time we think that insurance will cover roughly half of this. Well, we kept talking and we kept talking, and we said there's just no way that our insurance should have something in it, and we dug, and David found that if code requires you to build it better or than what was there before, or what was there before does not fit code would be a better way to put it, then the insurance covers the entire amount. So we actually got with local code enforcement and Shelby County code enforcement, got letters from them saying it had to be built to seismic code D, got that to the TML, and now instead of covering the $34,000, they're covering the entire $116,000 it takes to do the job. So that's just a small example, and we've had employee issues, all those different types of things. That all flows through the TML. We've have had a good, long-standing working relationship with them. So, in regards to the quote that we brought you on moving liability coverage, it's a $14,000 difference that we would be taking on in premiums. So if you look at the liability total, it's $48,000 with the coverage that we currently have. That's $2 million in errors and omissions, and then the optional liability quote on the bottom is $62,049. So it's a difference of roughly $14,000 for $5 million in coverage versus $2 million. Now I'm going to be quiet and let David talk about what that covers us on.
So your regular liability, if there's an accident at the school or an accident in a vehicle, tort liability from Tennessee says that you're responsible for $300,000 per person and $700,000 per accident. So that limits your liability. What's not covered under that would be any federal actions, Title IX, employee practices for wrongful termination, teachers' professional liability. And right about the time I was making this recommendation, they said, hey, what about a 15-passenger van? So when that 15-passenger van is in Tennessee and it has an accident, it's $300,000 per person and $700,000 for the whole accident and per person. If it goes over into Mississippi, there's no protection. If it goes to Kentucky, there's no protection. So that vehicle kind of made it a no-brainer to me, because anybody would want about $5 million worth of coverage for those sporadic incidences where you do go across the line. The other thing I'll say is that where y'all look at this, the TML board did pass no rate increases. So a lot of what you're looking at as far as the increases is the underlying exposure. You're just a little bit bigger of a school district. We got a little bit more property. We're about to have a lot more property, a few more students. So that kind of drives the student accident policy that we have in here. But what you're looking at is fairly reflective. On the members' dividends, it doesn't look like a big number, but you've got to remember, we want that number as small as it can be. We don't want the TML having a lot of excess funds, because you want as small as you can be so you know exactly what your budget numbers are. Any questions?
I don't have a question about the numbers per se, but just that, like the first page where it talks about the additional named insureds. Just curious, like the City of Germantown, Germantown Education Foundation, Houston High Athletic and Arts Foundation, how does that relate to this? Okay,
so how that relates is Germantown does some of your landscaping.
Okay.
Germantown does some of your school protection.
Okay.
So what happens is let's say you have a police officer on site and there's an incident that occurs, both of y'all get named in it. What we really want to do is get one party to own the claim.
Okay.
And so it may be the City of Germantown, if they're, because you're also named on the City of Germantown's policy.
Okay.
So what we want to do is to go ahead and to tender the defense over to somebody that's actually, and so as far as the interlocal agreements, there's still the transportation that's under the interlocal agreements with the schools. So that's just kind of spells out who y'all have relationships with as far as liability goes.
And so that would, and so they're pretty much reciprocal, like the Germantown Education Foundation has its own, so we would be named on their policy.
Correct.
So it's just kind of that reciprocal.
So if someone
type.
got hurt at a race or.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How is the board
Right, exactly.
of
That's a good
education
point.
covered?
The Board of Education is covered right now $2 million. So your errors or your omissions in the administration of the school district is $2 million. That was before I knew about the 15-passenger van. There's just a lot of things that are going out there right now. And for a while there, it may have been a little bit of a budget, but now that we've kind of gotten established, I really feel it's the time to move it. I can't remember the gentleman's name. He worked for, he worked as an attorney, but he just said, you know, what would you recommend as far as more coverage? I said, at this point, I think that we're fine. We're really tight. We're moving out of Legacy Shelby County, but this is kind of the time to take a look at that now.
But the Board of Education is covered under errors and omissions.
Yes.
Liability. Okay. Questions? Ms. Parker?
I don't have any.
Okay. Ms. Oak, you look worried.
I'm just thinking about 15-passenger vans.
Thank you for your.
Thank you very much.
counsel.
Well, I tell you what, it's
Appreciate
good staff to work with, and we get good timely information and work well during budget times, because you don't need any spikes and unforeseen costs.
Yes,
Thank you
sir,
very
that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Superintendent, attendance zone recommendation.
So just to give you a history, of where we are and where we've been. As you know, we had a school site selection committee that really started this whole process for us. It ran from October of 2016 to March of 2017. We had 3 committee meetings, 2 surveys, 2 forums, and we really feel like we identified the parcel that was best for our new school, and hopefully y'all saw that when we did the groundbreaking. It is going to be a tremendous campus out there. It is a phenomenal facility. So how did we move from the school site selection to actually the process where we're getting ready to narrow down where we are in the school zones? You know, we didn't start this process when we did the forum. Student Services have actually worked on this for months and months and months, looking at multiple attendance zone options. They were trying to split the city in numerous ways and find out the best way. And as you know, because we all did the activity also, it's really hard. We have some built-in challenges, especially when we talk about middle school capacity. From there, we created the base zone. So when we look at the image on the left, you know, we were identifying areas that geographically we could see no way that we would rezone those areas because they would be driving such a great distance from where they currently live, and they're near an existing school to the new elementary school. And that's how we came up with the base zones that are on the left, and then the middle school base zones that are on the right. So there's a slight difference, but it would not make sense that you would have someone in Grove Park, for example, going to Riverdale Middle School because of the distance they would have to travel to do that. The next step moving from there was really the involvement of numerous stakeholders. So really from August of 2017 to this July, this summer or June, when the board finally puts their stamp on this, know that we have engaged multiple stakeholders in this process. We had 3 focus group meetings. We had a district-wide survey. We had a citywide forum. We've had multiple principal and assistant principal meetings to really engage administration. We had 2 PTO presidents meetings. We had a special called Board of Education meeting where y'all were actually doing the zoning process yourselves and actually created one of the scenarios. We did city school work group meetings, so we shared that same information, and I've shared the same presentations that the board has seen with Kiwanis, with Rotary Club, with Realtors Associations, trying for everyone to understand the process and all the details that we went through when we're looking at this school zoning process. And so what did we try to have clear messages about? So we were trying to show the enrollment numbers, and we do have to clarify the date on each of those because usually we're using the August enrollment. As you know, it's always a moving target. We're looking at 20-day reports with student enrollment numbers, and where they are yesterday was not where they're going to be by the end of the school year. So know that that's a changing factor. We do have very clearly defined non-resident numbers of each of our schools that y'all have seen in numerous presentations for this board and also for the city. But then also we talked about those board challenges that we know that we've talked about the transfer policies. We've talked about the numbers of non-residents in our schools, and we helped identify that, yes, this is a concern for us. What are we going to do with students who are at their exit years in schools? We know those are future conversations that this board has to have and that we have to discuss. And then we talked about opportunities for engagement. So how are we going to really involve the community in this process? So know that this has been a long process, and we feel like we have really engaged a lot of different stakeholder groups. As you know, we did have a focus group that actually helped with this process. We had parent representatives from each of the schools. There were 46 applicants, and we were looking at where they were geographically, but also how they were affiliated with certain schools and could they be available, and we mirrored the human resources forms. Then Student Services started designing activities that could really engage the focus committee and also the community. So one thing we looked at was neighborhood clusters. So we geocoded all students in the district. We actually looked at their address, plot them on a map, and defined where they were. And you know, as you move these puzzle pieces, we had those numbers looking at K through 5 students, 6 through 8 students, and we started actually creating those puzzle pieces that we could move in the activity. Then when we were in those focus groups, they're actually trying to create some potential school zones. Even though Student Services had done multiple different options, they were trying to create their own. And so they were subdivided into a focus group with principals, parents from each affected school, and we made sure that we had people who were affected, that people who weren't living in those base zones, those were the people that we chose for this. Then when we look at the activities, they had the puzzle pieces, you know, that y'all got to participate in. We looked at the different options. And then the board did the exact same activity. So not only were we using the puzzle pieces to create these different options, we were evaluating them. So it was actually the focus group and the board that came up with our pros and cons for each of these scenarios, because we know we're not going to be able to make a perfect school zone that's going to make everyone happy. We just hope they understand the process we went through, and that we are aware of that all of these have limitations, but all of them have benefits when we look at the different school zones. And we published 3 proposals on our website, and y'all are familiar with these proposals and have seen them and gone through them, and you can go to our website. But we'll talk about some of the key characteristics that we think made this special versus other zoning proposals that you don't see. So for example, when you look at map proposal A, once again, you see the big chunks, the puzzle pieces, the base zones. You have the identified pros on the right side, or cons, depending on which version you're looking at. We made sure that we identified changes in the school zones so that people could know, when I'm looking at a map, what does that really mean? What does this mean for this neighborhood, these people who are involved in this process? So that's why we had the yellow outline that indicated that they were actually getting moved from one school to another. The color of the label also could tell the individual what school they previously attended. So we're hoping that we're being really transparent with the information around this zoning. And know too that some of the solutions came up with a way to balance schools, but it was actually a con in a lot of them. And that's a pink outline that says that they will go to one elementary school, a cohort of students, but they'll be attending another middle school. So know that that was identified in all of our maps also. Other information that we looked at, we talked about being very important. We've talked numerous times about optimum and maximum capacity, and the board's objective to try to move us to optimal capacity numbers. So we're making sure that when we're looking at those, we're including those numbers. And the activity, when we look at the maps and we actually move the clusters, as you know, we were trying to hit that optimal capacity number as best as possible, but know that a lot of these ended up being somewhere in the middle. So on this map, for example, this image you can see at Dogwood had wound up with 671 students, well below that optimal capacity number, but 144 below the maximum capacity number as defined by the state. And you can see the current number of employees, children, and the 661 number is the number of students that are actually residents that attend that school. Then we had a public forum. We had 126 people attend that forum, and they all completed surveys and feedback for the board, and you all have seen those because you did receive a binder that had all of the information in it, along with the survey results from the community. And so, you know, at the March meeting that we had 579 respondents. Y'all were all given that big Bible of information that you were allowed to go through and look at. So let's talk about some of those. So when we look at the proposals, I think the challenge is, I don't feel like there is a slam dunk. I don't feel like this is the school site selection where I was like, this is the one that the community is completely behind, or this is the proposal that is best for the district. We really do have a challenge here, and I think that's why this is going to be a difficult decision for this board. When I look at map proposal B, and we talk about the key components for B, it is the most balanced proposal that we have. It accommodates middle school growth along with the elementary school growth, and you can see this is the elementary school model. But if I look at room for 165 students at Dogwood, 138 at Farmington, 154 at Riverdale, and the new schools got room for 286. It's going to be large at all of them, but it starts out with 529 students. That's a beneficial proposal. The challenge for B comes when we start looking at how it divides the city and whether we're looking at Poplar as the dividing line. But I would also say the challenge comes for B in its middle school options. This was something that we dealt with at Houston High School for years. It is so hard for kids to go to school with their friends, and the example I could give is at Schilling Farms. We always had students at Houston who went to Schilling, and they would have a group of kids with them, and then some of their friends would move on to Houston High School, and some of them would move on to Collierville High School, and that was a challenge. Some of those friends are lost in that process. So know that for me, that's one of the big negatives about map proposal B, is that splitting of the cohort. I think in talking to the Riverdale families too, and you all got to read through all the information too, they also see MAP Proposal B as difficult for their community, along with the students who are having the split cohort, because you have students who've attended their kindergarten through 5th grade, and they're moving up to the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and all of a sudden I have a new group of students that are coming in. So know that even the Riverdale families who are there K through 8 see this as being something different from their K through 8 model, that they don't like that transition. So the difficulty that I have is if I was just looking at straight numbers and we weren't going to get a wing onto Houston Middle School, then I would say that B is the recommendation for the district. However, know that that builds in cohorts getting divided. That I don't think that's something that we want to wind up with, which moves us to scenario C. Know that scenario C is a creation. It is a board creation. It does have some possibilities of some good balanced numbers. I think this is a really good proposal, and the community saw this as a good proposal also when you look at the feedback. The challenge I have with this one is not at the elementary school numbers. It's pretty balanced. The problem is when we look at the optimal capacity at Houston Middle School, and the day that we open the doors with 924 students, that's a concern for me. Now, if we can be guaranteed that we're going to get a new wing onto Houston Middle School and a new gym to accommodate what they're having to do with the MAP schedules, then C doesn't become as big an issue. That takes that sting out of that proposal. But no, that's a concern. The other concern I have is with Riverdale's number at 370. When we look at how we have to staff the teachers at Riverdale at the middle school level, and we have one teacher that is doing 6 different preps because they're teaching different levels of math courses, they're teaching enriched math courses and standard math courses, that becomes a real problem for me with this C. Now, that can be accommodated through transfers, and we haven't dug into the numbers yet when we start talking about what is going to be our expectation of students who are in their 7th or 8th grade year at Riverdale. That's a discussion that this body has to have, is what do we want to do with transfer numbers for those students. So that can be accommodated in the short term. But know that C really scares me at the middle school level, that unless we get some relief at Houston Middle School, C is problematic.
Or could it be an additional cost where because you're struggling with the fact of can you justify the cost of another teacher? Am I thinking about that
That's
correctly?
right.
Versus if we say that's a cost of the issue that we have with this, and we just know as a board that we might need to staff, I'm just gonna make this up, at 400 or
That's
420.
right.
But we know that we only have 370. Is that just something, because we know that the numbers will probably start edging up
Yes.
over time, so that then to your point, you might not have the schedule.
So you may have to leave a teacher there, even though the
Right.
BEP revenue, on the revenue
That's right.
side of things, you're
That's
correct.
right.
It could
Just
come
just a
with,
cost, so that could just be something we know is additional cost to keep it at the optimal
yes.
level, right?
So to answer your question,
Just the only thing.
I
One
don't-
question I have for
yes.
you, just real quick, is how many students are currently at Houston Middle, including all the transfers? Like
it would
right
be
now,
960 ballpark.
okay, so we have 960 in the school today.
And I would say that we are right, like we've talked about, we're right at the breaking point.
That's right.
Because we are currently using the 2 science labs as regular classrooms.
Right.
So know that is not something that we want. We want to have a rotation into those science labs, same as Riverdale. I don't want you to think that we're not having the same issues at
Right.
Riverdale School. We're using spaces that should be communal, that we rotate in and out of, like the STEM lab there
Right.
is being used for, they're being used for permanent instruction, so.
And that is, and that's, when are we talking about transfers? Refresh my memory.
It would be
After
after
the
this, because I think what we do with transfers is dependent upon the zone that we chose.
And I don't disagree, but what I'm saying is that under this, with no transfers, we would be under
That's right.
where we are today. And I think that's just a point to make.
Yeah, but if you go to the page, it shows how many you think we'll have.
Yes, that's right.
Without it. I think it's 93.
So you can see, for example, like at
We'll be
Houston
at
Middle School for
93.
right now, we're averaging 21 transfer students, and most of those are employees, children. So we would be looking at 945 just with the employees' children
Right, versus the 968.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Unless I did my math wrong, no,
I think.
yeah,
No, you did good.
okay.
So, two questions. One, the neighborhood right there highlighted in yellow, that's I'm trying to,
Mhm. They would go to the new school, but go to Riverdale.
but they're red, so they're going to Houston Middle.
Yeah.
What is that, what
Yeah,
does
what's
that
the- what is the
signify?
yellow?
Help me see that?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't read it on my map.
They were previously zoned Riverdale?
They're zoned to the new school, the
Yeah.
elementary school, and then they follow the cohort to Houston Middle School,
Yeah.
but they're blue right now because currently
What's
they're
the-
Riverdale
Yeah, so they-
and today.
What's the number? What's the number? Can you see it, Kay? What's the number on there?
71 is K through 5.
You can blow that up if you want.
71 is K through
I think
5.
that's what it says here. You have that.
She has a hard, she has a hard copy.
I couldn't read it.
I
I know what
yeah,
she's
I-
doing,
I
it
got
sounds like she's
71.
canoeing down the river.
I was trying to read it. I couldn't read it.
Okay, I don't know, I'm gonna turn your volume down some, because we don't need to hear you as much, it's really loud.
I'm just glad you aren't the bathtub.
Is she on?
It's a rainstorm.
I'm just being funny.
Rainstorm.
Now you can go.
Okay,
So it's 71 K through 5.
It looks like 71 to me.
71.
And they do 36?
It's 71 and 36.
Okay.
so now that, because we looked at that, because that was
Yeah,
one of the
and
things.
that was the
we-
hardest one. I will say,
Right.
when we went through this, that's a
Yes.
big number. And
It
it,
is
I
a
mean,
big
it's,
number.
remember, I mean, it's a big swing. I mean, it's a big neighborhood to.
So, right, so when
And not to
the
be
board,
taken
yes,
lightly.
because when we develop this, know that that then drops Riverdale's middle school numbers to 300 or 299, and then it bumps Houston Middle School's numbers up to over, close to 1,000, so that's a
And then,
challenge.
So back to the elementary. The identified con here was that the new school was a little low. Was there any consideration in moving, because in Plan B, the purple
Yeah.
extended up one more neighborhood. Is there any consideration in moving
No, over to the.
over
park.
on the east side? East side?
Yeah.
East. Use your little pointer to the east.
East.
To the east, to the east.
There,
Keep going, keep going.
There, you see that
That
purple?
neighborhood,
This one right here?
yes.
Okay.
Moving that neighborhood, so that proposal C would also include that neighborhood in the new school, which would bump the
Bump it up,
numbers of the new school up just a bit and make it closer to, I think that might balance it just even a little more, because it doesn't
I think
reduce
that's 19
dogwood.
and 16.
It doesn't reduce dogwood so much
No, it
that
always
would-
higher anyway.
it was higher anyway. So just that one minor change might also balance the numbers in the elementary school just a little more.
Mhm.
And it's not so far north that I don't even think it touches, the other dogwood.
Yeah, I think the reason that, and like I said, this was board created, I think the reason that this one was developed this way was because we were trying to keep students where they go.
Yeah, I just think that is another possibility, because if we're wanting our numbers balanced as much as possible in the elementary school, and we want to make sure we have a decent number in our new school, we may just look at adding that one extra piece.
My only concern, I don't disagree with you. My
Yeah.
only concern is we've gone through this whole process and we've told the parents.
Well, even in the
And-
proposals,
and-
we told the parents, these are not
I
hard
know,
and
but I'm
fast
just saying,
proposals.
we just need to keep that in mind too, that if that does occur, they need to be done. If
Right.
they change like that. But were you saying moving that one down, you're talking about the little one moving and keeping it river down? Or keeping
No,
it-
I was just trying to get
Basically, what
clarification
you're
on that
doing
little
is you're
one, 'cause I
saying you're
didn't know.
taking,
You're just.
you'd be
So you're
taking
just trying to
Dogwood to
increase
700
the new school.
and the
Just
new
trying to-
school to 450. That's basically what you
Just
do.
increase the new school to 450, to make it a little closer to the B
Right.
proposal.
Which helps from the elementary side, but then you start the
It doesn't
question of
change
the
it.
neighborhood. That
Right,
is
explain.
the only neighborhood that is
Control.
in the new elementary school that then goes back to Riverdale.
No, you're
No,
looking at the
no,
wrong
we're talking
neighborhood.
about the Highlands.
She's talking
The
about the
Highlands.
I know she's talking about the Highlands. I said you still have the issue
Oh,
It's
you
a
still
different
do,
issue.
you absolutely
Yeah.
do, but when you have those numbers, it's hard. She's just saying that you still have an issue there.
Oh, yeah, that remains, I'm not sure how to deal with that. I'm still thinking on that one. But I'm just saying
I'm
that
not sure we can.
I don't think that's where I am too, with you, because I'm not sure there's much we can do about that. But I am just saying, I think in terms of balancing the numbers on the elementary school side, it makes more sense for the Highlands to be included in the new school than it does to include them in Dogwood. It reduces Dogwood numbers and it raises the new school numbers.
Slightly.
Yes, but still it's still an increase.
I know you like
I do.
thoughts, because
I do.
you're a student.
I think with that scenario, you're moving kids away from Dogwood that are currently there for 16 kids, and the proximity to Dogwood, they're closer, especially the top half of the neighborhood, they're closer to Dogwood, and proximity was one of the guiding principles that were used.
Well, I'd be fine with splitting neighborhoods, so I know I'm unpopular on that side. That's fine. Just don't stab me in the back. I've got my back to you for a reason.
I mean,
Because
having-
sometimes you have to do that.
having
You
had
have to,
children
yeah.
who have gone through this twice,
Right.
it's nice if your neighborhood is together, because that's who your children are with the majority of the time. We're fortunate to have a community that's small enough that, yes, they interact. You know,
Right,
if
on the
you
ball
don't
fields.
get to go to the same middle school, you're on ball fields, you're at
Right.
church activities. There are other times that you get to see those friends. But to split a neighborhood is really hard.
It is hard, but I'm
Particularly
not
for
saying it's
elementary
needed.
school.
I'm just saying Highlands, I think that is a doable thing. It's
Well, see,
on
my
Plan
problem
B.
is, B is the most balanced, but I don't like the middle school of B.
No. And I think we'll be coming back to this table and having to make decisions again, depending on
Middle
So,
school.
the middle
but-
school.
Issues, yeah.
Drum
Yeah,
roll,
so do you
please.
do
What
that
is your
and then resume
recommendation?
again?
I would say B or C.
B or C, thank you so much.
The reality is, I would
Started
say,
at B or.
I would say C, if this group can be assured that we have middle school capacity. If we have some type of affirmation that we are going to have the space to accommodate the students at Houston Middle School.
And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If we can sit across the table from the BMA and say, this is where we are, and
Because
we
that
need
was-
affirmation from you, hard and fast, that this will happen next year.
Because that was insinuated in the story from the mayor, if we needed it. I mean, he basically said, if you feel like you need it, then we're gonna make sure we put it in the plan. And so I think that's very fair.
Well, I think this would give more
I agree.
More
push.
I
Yes,
agree
it
with,
is.
I agree
It's
with
more
you.
wood and
I
fire.
agree with you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question that, I don't know if you put me in the hot seat or not, but how far is that one neighborhood that's coming out of Riverdale? What's the mileage to the new
Yeah.
school versus Riverdale?
Or the Highlands neighborhood?
No, the one that,
The one
that
that's-
was Riverdale, that's,
Oh, okay.
Visually, it looks like it would be closer to the new school, but I can't, I mean,
We can
I'm
look and see.
directionally just, I mean, I'm.
We can find that information out for you.
Google map it.
So where do we go from here? So we have this discussion, we've unveiled, we've said administration would be B or C.
I
Do we
think-
just?
Or a hybrid of B or C. Excuse me.
But would we go, so do we just sit on this and then we come back at a work session again in June and then
Yes.
vote on it in June?
That would be my request.
Okay.
And then hopefully,
June 4th.
yes.
And hopefully by then,
No,
maybe
June
we
4th 's
might
not
get
voting.
18th or 4th or 18th?
June 4th.
It's
Is that
fourth,
in the board
and then
meeting?
the 18th,
Okay.
so the fourth.
I would say, I would think the 18th.
18th.
We've already got your,
Well, we'll have to
We'll
look and see.
figure it
I think it
We'll
all
look at
depends
that.
on when we get, have that conversation with the city and we find out the plan.
Which
for
would be
Houston
another
Middle
reason
School.
to have the conversation with them. I mean, to be able to say that we're in the
Oh,
midst of the
most
zoning,
definitely.
right? I mean, I think
Most
it's definitive, yeah.
And we have a
that's great.
deadline coming
Mr.
up.
Bland?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there, when these were put together, they were the elementary and the middle school, can you split them apart? Like, could you take a B and a C, or is that just totally throw off everything?
It throws it off
Yeah.
because you only have two options.
Yeah.
and the way
I had to try.
that we have to
No,
split
no,
it.
no, I know, I just remember we were having that conversation before, and it was hard, I mean,
And
there's
I
no
know
answer.
you've worked on this for months, and so you feel like which one's a better fit for you as
From
student
students.
services?
Just student services, our recommendation to the superintendent was B.
And can you tell me exactly why?
The balance of the elementary
Ms.
school.
Crowder,
and
can you
middle
flip
school.
back to B?
The balance at both levels.
Okay.
Because it's the most balanced,
Best
for the
balance.
4 elementary numbers, and it's the most balanced for the middle school.
What's your picture?
Well, I also. but I think-
Mr. Bland, the student services recommended B.
And I guess too, my question is, when we look at this, where have we had the biggest growth? We've had the biggest growth in elementary at Riverdale.
Riverdale.
So, I mean, I think that's also something to consider too, to keep in mind, is which schools we're having the biggest growth in.
That's right.
Right.
Right,
I
and
agree
I
with
would,
Linda.
I think that's, and I think it's also, just personally, when I look at this, when you see, we're anticipating the biggest growth area coming into the new elementary, so having that a little low to begin with might not be a bad thing. But then when you look at the middle school, this
Those are better
option puts
numbers.
us over optimal at Riverdale. And we just finished a spectacular addition there. And I think we should, my opinion is we should
Yeah.
go in with an under optimal at Riverdale, because to your point, Ms. Fisher, we're having growth in that area. I mean, that's an area that's gonna be growing for us. So, I think we just need to push the envelope a little at Houston Middle to be able to work towards that addition, because that's where our city's going. I mean, I think we're not looking back, we're only gonna get bigger.
Part of another reason why I guess I'm still in the hot seat, for B was, you don't want to go through this whole process and rezone, and if we don't get additional funding from the city, have to put portables at Houston Middle. Then I think that's a nightmare for the district to have to go through. It's a PR nightmare to rezone and then flop down portables as soon as you do.
And I think that's why it's imperative that we have a conversation
With the city.
with the BMA and the administration
Yep,
to know how firm that
that's right.
$5 million for Houston Middle
Addition could be.
in 2020.
That's a very, very valid point.
Okay. Is there anything else? This is going to be posted for, well, there's no recommendation, but we've eliminated one.
Yes.
Right.
We've eliminated one.
We've
and we'll
eliminated
discuss.
A, so.
And
we
these
could-
are still on the
Right, yes,
website,
ma'am.
right?
Right.
Okay.
I had asked last time to be added onto the agenda for the meeting for a school safety report,
Yeah, you're on the,
whereas.
It's the superintendent, sorry. That is the whole superintendent's report, is the whole safety report.
oh,
Okay,
well,
so
because I
I'll
was
be
going to
part
make
of
it the
that.
chairman's report, so we can
Oh.
fight over
Okay,
that.
y'all just tell me when to
We'll
talk,
fight over
because
that.
I
I
wrote
will.
Oh, I thought you
something
meant
up.
our safety report that you.
No.
Yes.
I
I
wanted
was
to report
gonna-
on the summit.
Great.
After the chairman's report, I was going to ask you to present the safety report. Will
Awesome,
that do?
thank you, that will do, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure it hadn't been
It
forgotten.
had not, I have a big yellow sticky note.
Okay, wonderful. I'm still torn on the consent agenda with the one item,
What is it?
the one policy review item with the wording. I'm just still not comfortable. So I guess I'm asking to pull that from consent agenda, just that one policy, please.
So make it, what number does that become?
Is it the 8B or 8C?
It is,
It's,
It would be-
8B,
it would be
because we have two policies. Do you want to just pull one policy or?
just one
no,
policy.
just the one, the
Just the one on
honors.
the AP
The
honors. and-
4.203.1.
Yes.
Pull it out of consent and add it.
It'll be 9E under board action items.
Thank you.
thank you.
Just one question I have is, just an update on the principal position. Have we got an open position out there?
As of
Where do we
right now,
stand
Rob
on
Taylor
that?
is the interim principal of Houston High School, and I'll make that decision as we go through this process. I don't know the answer to your timeline yet. Right now, Rob Taylor's the interim principal at Houston High School.
Okay.
Okay. If there is nothing further for the work session, then we will stand adjourned, and you have 4 minutes. To make a mad dash.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll call the meeting of the Germantown Municipal School Board of Education to order. Would you all please join me in a moment of silence? Thank you. Ms. Oaf, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if everyone will please stand? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item this evening is the approval of the agenda as amended. The chair will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The agenda stands approved. Next item on our agenda is recognitions and awards, our favorite time of the evening. Superintendent Manuel? Yes, sir.
This past week, we had a historic moment in the Germantown Municipal School District and the city of Germantown. We were able to participate in a groundbreaking ceremony for our new elementary school. I believe that we have only been able to accomplish this goal through the partnerships with the city of Germantown leadership and our local Board of Education. However, two individuals in this district have committed an inordinate amount of time to make sure that this project has proceeded on schedule and will be a future source of enduring pride for the school district. To get to the point, Mr. Cathy and Mr. Law spent the past 6 months in the site selection process and another 6 months in the design process for this facility. They were both utilizing and listening to the voices of various stakeholders, committees, and focus groups. The approval process lasted 4 to 5 months and took an incredible amount of attention to detail. Just so that everyone understands, that included preparation for meetings and presentations to 8 different deciding bodies. The Board of Zoning and Appeals, the Design Review Commission, the Planning Commission, the Financial Advisory Commission, the City of Germantown Engineering Department, the State Fire Marshal, the local Fire Marshal, and of course the Germantown Board of Education. These reviews yield numerous changes in the plans that must be addressed quickly. And just to let you know where this journey ends, this is the new elementary school. Everything from the pipes inside of the walls to the way the brick is laid to the foundation of this school, it's an over 1,300 page document that they've spent hours and months and a year preparing for. So with that, we'd like to take the moment to recognize that the journey from planning to the bid day produced this document, and we were excited that we could finally break ground on the new school, and we're excited to see what happens next. So with that, we would like to recognize Mr. Josh Cathy and Mr. Aaron Law. So Aaron couldn't be here. We'll give it to Mr. Law tomorrow. And that concludes awards and recognitions.
Congratulations, Mr. Kathy, on behalf of the board. You and Mr. Law have done an incredible job. And while the notebook is impressive, that's only half the story, because there's reams and reams of schematics and plans, and it's just beginning, actually, and it's going to be a long summer for you and Mr. Law. So thank you, and for all you do for us. And moving on, next item of business on our agenda is reports. We'll begin with the TLN report. Ms. Jones?
Thank you. This session of the General Assembly ended with a bang at the end of April. With the failure of TN Ready, it created a swirl of activity in the last week of the legislative session. The General Assembly passed legislation to address the testing and accountability concerns following these additional assessment issues. There was an amendment to House Bill 75 and Senate Bill 578 that stated, notwithstanding any law to the contrary, no adverse action may be taken against any student, teacher, school, or LEA based in whole or in part on student achievement data generated from the 2017 and 2018 Tennessee TN Ready assessments. This bill was in addition to a legislation that was passed the week before, which was a committee report which laid out quite a bit of succinct items of what this testing can and cannot be used for this year. One of the items that you will see that we will be approving is a change to our policy to have the testing this year not have any impact, 0% impact for the grades this year. So the legislators got a full swell of information out. Now we're hitting summer. A lot of campaigning going on, so not as much focus on legislation. We're hoping that later in the fall, as the campaigning starts winding down, we'll be able to get with our legislators and potential legislation for the next session of the General Assembly.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Chairman's report. We'll just highlight a few things. As many of us as possible attended the Financial Advisory Commission for the City of Germantown to present our capital improvement requests and budget. I also attended the Superintendent's Roundtable for Parent Leaders, which is a wonderful opportunity to interact with all of the PTO presidents in the district and hear their thoughts and concerns and ideas. Attended the GMSD retiree luncheon last week, which was a very fun occasion, and those in charge did a wonderful job. And it's amazing at a retiree luncheon how excited everyone is. So it was fun to listen to their plans and be a little bit envious. Then, of course, same day we participated in the groundbreaking for the new elementary school, which was particularly exciting for all of us. It has been a year-long process, and having served on both the site selection committee and the design committee, I took particular pride in the groundbreaking. If you haven't had a chance to see the site, sneak up there and look at what's going on, and particularly admire the gorgeous oak tree, which we found out was over 400 years old, which we are planning to take very good care of as we build. There's several other things on here, but I'll conclude with the fact that I recently attended the Houston High School choir concert last week. There's another one this Friday night. If you missed the one last week, it's always more than worth your time to go hear our incredible choirs. They do an amazing job, and we all need to get out and support them. And with that, I will conclude the chairman's report with the fact that I just wanted to let you all know that our board secretary, Ms. Subramani, will be attending the Tennessee Association of Board Secretaries Conference in Nashville Friday, May the 11th. And as the TAB's president for 2017-18, she's also going to be giving a presentation for the conference, and I love the title. Refresh and rejuvenate how to break the monotony and take on the challenges of a board secretary. And I know from time to time we give her a few. So that concludes the chairman's report, and I would like to ask Ms. Oaf to present a report on the TSBA School Safety Summit in Nashville that she and Ms. Parker recently attended. Ms. Parker has submitted a report in writing which will be passed on to the Secretary for the record. But Ms. Oaf, would you please give your report?
Thank you, Chairman. On April 18th, Ms. Parker, Chauncey Bland, and Mason Grace and I attended the School Safety Summit hosted by TSBA. During this day-long summit, we were instructed on everything related to school safety, from law and policy to law enforcement and mental health. Here are a few of my personal takeaways. Number one, policies on general school safety, emergency preparedness, crisis management, and security should be in place and regularly reviewed by the school board, as should both district-wide and school building level school safety plans. We do a pretty good job of that, I believe, in this district, of making sure our safety plans and crisis management plans are in place and reviewed. SROs, number two, SROs, school resource officers, play an essential role in school safety as part of the school community. The SRO has a three-pronged role, and this was a new conversation for me, and I think for some of us. The National Association for SROs recommends this triad approach, which is educator, informal mentor, and law enforcement official. They play an important part in coordinating with school personnel to test security protocols, to evaluate and improve them, and to engage the school in training to create what they called muscle memory for crisis response. In our district, we are very fortunate that we have 6 SROs in our school buildings on a daily basis, 1 in each elementary school, 1 in the middle school, and 2 in our high school. That is not the case for every school in Tennessee. Some of them are still having to fight for funding for theirs. From Homeland Security, number 3, we were provided a chart that provides targets for crisis training activities based on developmental considerations for students. It gave me a real visual of what are our goals for drills. Mr. Cathy does a wonderful job of making sure we're taking care of our state-required drills. This chart that was provided opens your eyes to what is the goal for this elementary level drill. What do we want our children to move away from this drill with what skills when that crisis hits? Or in the high school, the goals are different. I found these very helpful as we consider how to prepare and not scare our students regarding our safety in our schools. Homeland Security also strongly recommends a district-level school safety coordinator. Those of you may not know that is on a wish list that Mr. Bland has requested, that we potentially look at that if we get additional funding. Number 4, the Tennessee Sheriff's Association SRO Committee communicated that it is key that we teach our children, see something, say something, hear something, say something, and that we hold our employees accountable to know the plans for the schools and to enforce safety when they're in the building. Technology is out there. I know Mr. Grace was getting a head full of knowledge on that. What I did see and what I was thrilled to see is we already have some of those things in place. And that encouraged me. We already have visitor management systems. We have anonymous alerts. And there are other things that we are using and looking at implementing. Surveillance cameras are another example. Their point was all are only as good as how well they are used. And I think that is something we can always look at and review. The mental health aspect was covered by Dr. Nicole Cobb from Vanderbilt, and she spoke about the connection between mental health and school safety. For me, this was the most poignant and meaningful time because this deals not with dealing with the crisis as it happens, but trying to prevent the crisis from happening from the get-go. She asked some really tough questions of us. First, how are we using our current school counselors? Are we using them to their fullest capacity, and especially in high school? How can we be using them more effectively? Number 2, how are you dealing with chronic absenteeism? Is that just sent to the truant's office, or are you building a plan with that family to see what's really going on behind the scenes? And 3, what is your school's climate? According to Dr. Cobb, the school climate refers to the quality and character of school life. One of the statistics she quoted is around 1/3 of students in Tennessee, in high school in Tennessee in 2017, disagree with the statement that the students at my school care about each other. And that was shocking to me. I think it's very important that we are intentional about creating a climate in our schools that is positive and is strong and is supportive of each other, both in students and in teachers. And lastly, of course, is how do you pay for all this? We had a panel discussion, and things were discussed such as state grants. $30 million has been earmarked by our governor to go towards school safety, which we will be hopefully applying for, particularly for some of our facility improvements. Also partnerships with our funding body, and they emphasize the need to communicate our needs to local bodies because they need to understand the importance of school safety, not just from a facilities plan, but also from creating that school climate, and what can you do to partner with us to create that positive school climate. I left this meeting challenged, encouraged, and motivated. As Dr. Cobb said, no school can be a great school unless it is a physically and emotionally safe school. And I look forward to working harder in my job as a board member to work with the superintendent to make sure that continues to be what we have in our schools. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to attend.
Thank you, Ms. Oaf, to you and to Ms. Parker for representing the board at the Safety Summit and bringing back the valuable information tonight, and I know moving forward. We appreciate your time. Next item on our agenda is the financial report. Mr. Jones.
You have your financial reports for the month ending April 30th. Reported in the school operating fund, total assets, liabilities, and fund balance at $22.8 million. In the federal projects fund, a receivable due from the Tennessee Department of Education at approximately $700,000. A cafeteria, total assets, liabilities, and fund balance at $263,000. Capital projects at $1.8 million. The health insurance fund reporting total assets, liabilities, and fund balance as well at $2.3 million. The OPEB trust is at $2.4 million. Our, general fixed asset account group, or plant, property, and equipment, is at $71.3 million. And just a couple comments on the statement of revenues and expenditures. In the school operating fund, the local government investment pool with the treasurer has generated $107,000 in interest income year to date. So a favorable variance in the other local revenue category. A record month for the cafeteria fund with sales and USDA reimbursements reported at $160,000. And for the OPEB trust and health insurance fund, we're processing currently $124,000 in reimbursements from the trust to the health insurance fund for retiree claims. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Superintendent Manuel, your report?
This is going to be a tag team approach between Mr. Grace, Mr. Bland, and myself. So we'll start out with Mr. Bland and Mr. Grace, if y'all would step up to the podiums. So I'll start. As you know, we have a strategic plan for the district, and one of our overarching goals is to establish 21st century classrooms in schools. And we have 3 objectives under that. Most of the time when we talk about this, we're talking about increasing technology and the way that teachers use it and students use it so that they can interact better with the curriculum and materials. But in this case, objective 4.3 is talking about maintaining and developing facility infrastructure to guarantee a safe and well-maintained learning environment. And so know that this is something that has been ongoing, that we work towards student safety in the district, but know that in light of recent events, we have taken a sharper focus on that and have done a lot of work around this. And so with that, I'll let Mr. Grace start the presentation about what have we been doing around student safety.
Yeah, so we definitely want to give an update of some changes we're going to be looking forward to in the future. But we also want to point out that we've done a lot. We do a lot every year to combat this. We sent out a letter to parents a few weeks ago that kind of highlighted all the professional development that's gone on throughout the year, starting with Mr. Bland and the SROs go to a national safety conference in the summer. They come back and they build the district emergency preparedness plan. The schools actually model their plans after that one, and then the staff at each school gets trained on those plans in the beginning of the year. To help with mental health, we actually have the counselors. They train the staff in the beginning. This August, they actually train the staff in seeing warning signs for mental health, child abuse, and bullying. And then this spring, they actually did a refresher course. There are actual detectives and other people in the police department that come and give training for students and parents on cyberbullying. So a lot of stuff happens throughout the year, just so you know. We don't want to miss that. One thing we have been recently doing is the cabinet, and along with the police officers, our Officer Shield has gone to each school and met with the safety teams there, which includes the administrators, the SROs there, the plant managers, and we've actually gone through their plan and make sure, just look at it, review it, make sure it's on page with what we're seeing. We also walk the schools and see what was needed there, and we'll talk about some needed improvements in a little bit. From that, we've also reached out to Captain Godwin in the police department, and he is going to each school and spending about an hour to hour and a half training the teachers on what to look for in the event of emergency and an active shooter. Actually, we talked to Mr. Picasso. He said that's probably one of the best things they've done all year. It was a really good training. He talked a lot about what they're looking for, and he wants to come back and actually in the next year for in-service, going to spend a little more time on not just active shooter training, but when he does that, he will go through and go through each classroom and talk about what a teacher will do in their classrooms. But he also wants to spend some time on, I think he called it combat first aid, because he said, when SWAT comes there, we're rushing through. We can't help you if you're hurt. We're going to find the threat. And so there's a lot of things teachers can do to help each other and save lives, just small things. So he wants to do that kind of training as well. With this extra training next year, we want to spend some time with students too, to let them know that kind of do a changing culture. We have wonderful students. They're very nice, and if they see somebody knock on the door, they're probably going to open the door and let them in. So we got to let them know that's probably not the best thing to do, because we don't know if that's somebody that should be in our schools. So we have to kind of go around and teach these things and teach the teachers just how to prevent things the best way, as far as keeping all their doors locked and the internal doors locked and not propping doors open. So we're going to spend a lot of time with the culture change during in-service too.
And I will clarify, on the training that they're doing in the classrooms, they're actually looking at each classroom for each teacher. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about where's the safe wall in this classroom, where do you need to keep students, if we have students that are in the cafeteria, where would be the safest location for those students. So no, that's part of this training, that they're actually looking at the specific locations for each of the schools.
So in regards to campus security, we have attended a lot of local and national training. Myself, Lieutenant Shield, we take 2 SROs. What we do, we come back, he'll redeliver to the officers. We redeliver to administration on protocol and what we've learned. And over the last 4 years attending these conferences, we've been able to talk to and interact with survivors from Newtown, Sandy Hook, to hear their story and to hear what they had in place, and to possibly bring some of that information back to adjust and revise our plans. So we do review emergency preparedness plans yearly and school level plans yearly. The school level plans are submitted to Mr. Grace now, and we look at those and we place them, and we, again, this year we did go out to look at those plans and walk the campuses to see what we could revise and review and revise. Also, when you talk about school safety, you have to include the social emotional part. We attend local bullying, intimidation, and harassment training. Ms. Law will redeliver to counselors today she did a session with assistant principals on threat assessments, the signs that she looks for, she's looking for when she does a threat assessment, and the key to stopping some of the problems that we have is early detection. So that if she can get that information out to the assistant principals, they can re-deliver to faculty and staff. If they see those signs, they notify her. She'll go out to the site and conduct a threat assessment. Also, at these conferences, anonymous alerts. When we went to the conference last month, I think it was number 3 on their list of technology that's useful, and it's just a way for students, staff, stakeholders to report anything that they may see or they think anything that they've heard. It's also helpful because you can attach video and pictures, so that also helps administration when they go and do their investigations. So just a lot of things that we've been doing over the last 4 years, a lot of local. The only national thing that we do is the National School Safety Conference, and it's a very good conference that we're fortunate to be able to go to.
And we also, we know we're not doing everything we can do for school safety, but we were also comforted by a lot of the recommendations we saw we were doing, and all of these were on that list of recommendation with the management system and the surveillance cameras and the controlled access in the doors. You can go to the next slide, please. And then, like he mentioned, the anonymous alerts was one they mentioned. They also mentioned a district-wide notification system, which of course we have, and that has an emergency feature too. So, right now you have to have permission. Like if you want to text somebody, they have to opt into it. But if we're in an emergency situation, we can text everyone with that opting in. So we do have that in place. They also talked about Gaggle there in the conference, which it will not only monitor all emails, but it will go through our OneDrive folders and look through documents, because sometimes students you may see some warning signs in their writings, like they're writing papers, and it'll actually scan those for certain phrases, and so Gaggle will go through those, and we're using that as well. And those are live monitors. It'll send it to a live monitor who's reading those and checking those for warning signs, and then they'll contact us if they see something.
So that leads us to goals for improvement, and a lot of these are mainly around facilities, but like Mr. Grace said, I think part of what we have to do is change the culture. We talk about the fact that our students feel safe when they're at the schools, and unfortunately we have to balance that with what's required, and when we have to change some of that culture. So after we do a lot of this training with the teachers, and we will also do it with the students at the beginning of the school year, we will actually start testing this. So we'll have some individuals that are working for the district to come around and see, can they get individuals to open doors for them, because it doesn't matter how secure an entrance you have as if a student just opens the door for and lets someone in. So know that those are areas and things that we want to change. But what are some of the recommendations that we have? And we know that the board identified this as being one of our priorities that we needed funding for, and we just put a number out there of $100,000 per school. Know that it could be more than that, but we've identified the fact that we want updated entrances at Houston High School, Houston Middle School, and Dogwood. Houston High School, for example, when parents get buzzed in, they get buzzed into the lobby. By taking out a window in the front office, you could actually have a secure entrance where they're actually buzzed into the main office and then get access to the building. At Houston Middle School, the same thing. Once they get buzzed in, they're immediately into an interior hallway. Building an exterior lockbox that would actually catch people coming into the school and then provide them access to the school. The same thing at Dogwood. We need some way to control the people once they're in the building, to have a controlled location where they can be identified at the desk, talk to about what their need is at the school district. So that's one of our recommendations, is actually building structures at those schools to change the security. Additional badge scanners so that all exterior doors have access control. So when we're talking about staff that are coming in and out, having a way that they can badge into that building. Creating an access control at the second door of Farmington in the main office. So once they're actually buzzed into the office, is there a second control mechanism that keeps them from then having access to the school? connecting the campus at Houston High School. And this will require some security changes and procedure changes that students wouldn't be allowed to walk outside anymore on the campus. We can unify the whole building by adding gate structures between the greenhouse and the A building, and then also on the back side of the A building to the varsity gym. You could leave those doors open in between the two buildings so students could have access in between, but no strangers could gain access to the campus and get into the building. So currently, right now, we have students that are transitioning between buildings, and that poses a security issue. And of course, we've identified that we need to upgrade our existing cameras and add cameras to our campuses. And we do have a pretty good price on that at over $261,000 that we've identified to upgrade all of our cameras at our facilities. And finally, one of the things that Mr. Cathy is researching is audible alarms for doors when they're propped open. So if we do have a situation that it's a really secure building and so a student decides to prop a door, or the teachers go out for recess and they leave a door that accidentally gets propped, this will alarm the school administration, the SROs in the building. There will be an actual audible alarm to notify them. So for us, when we talk about where do we go from here and the requests that we have for our funding bodies and how do we proceed, we've identified these as key areas that we see for improving our district, along with the training and all the professional development that comes with it. And with that, besides it being Mr. Bond's birthday, that concludes the superintendent's report. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mr. Bonds. Thank you, Superintendent Manuel. Will that be posted online on the website?
Yes.
Okay, the presentation will be posted on the website for the community. Next order of business will be the citizens to be heard. Citizens are asked to complete a card indicating their desire to address the Germantown Board of Education. To give the completed card to the executive secretary seated in the front of the room. We have quite a few this evening. Comments must be constructive. The school board will not entertain any disrespectful comments regarding elected officials, staff, or teachers. Citizens will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Time is subject to change as determined by the chairman. And with that, our first card this evening is Dawn Grayson. Ms. Grayson, if you'll come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Either one of the mics is fine.
It's on. Thank you. My name is Dawn Grayson, Grayson. I live at 7007 Lawton Cove, Memphis, Tennessee, 38139. We appreciate the time you have given us to speak to you today. We are grateful for all that you do to keep Germantown schools a safe and successful learning environment for our children. I am speaking to you today as a representative of a concerned group of citizens. I am speaking on behalf of present, past, and future students and parents of Houston High School. We send our children to school in the hopes that the environment they are in is safe, inspiring, and conducive to academic success. The vision of Germantown City Schools is excellence always. The mission statement of Germantown City Schools is to prepare, inspire, and empower students to become lifelong learners and socially responsible citizens. We feel that our students deserve this from us, from their teachers and their leaders who allow this vision and mission statement to be a reality. We feel that we cannot ask our children to do this if the school system and its faculty does not do this as well. We are frustrated that there is evidence to support that one of the teachers that leads our students has allegedly shown behavior that is both disturbing and detrimental to our children. We are deeply disappointed because we feel that there is evidence to support that there was a pattern of behavior from this educator that was not addressed at the administrative level and allowed to continue for a long amount of time. We accept and acknowledge that this teacher is not here to defend themselves against specific accusations, so we will not name this teacher, nor will we go into specific allegations and details. We acknowledge that the board and the superintendent and staff are now investigating these claims, and we appreciate it. We respect the rights of citizens to a fair and impartial judgment, and we know that there is a process dealing with these claims and accusations, and we respect that as well. We feel, however, as a concerned group of citizens, that we have rights as well. We feel we are entitled to have transparency on these serious issues. We feel that we have the right to know that our children are safe and will be safe from future harm, both physical and emotional. I am a teacher, and I have given my life to this selfless profession. I believe that the generation of children we are raising are not just in the hands of their parents, but also in our hands as educators and leaders. We have a sacred and solemn role to uplift our students and to teach them that they must be responsible for their actions to themselves and to others.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson.
We would like to ask all parents and citizens to stand at this time who support these sentiments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson. Thank you all. Next is Sherry, and I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce it, Denier? Your choice. Just state your name and address, please, for the record.
Cherie Didier, 3111 Winston Way, Germantown 38138. I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of what I've dealt with Houston High School. I'd like to tell you about my personal experience with Mr. Terry. My daughter went to wellness class at Houston High School and was choked out by an athlete that was at least double her weight. He held her mouth and nose closed.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We cannot have any comments that are disparaging of any of our staff or teachers. That was in part of the instructions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize that we couldn't talk about what's going on with our children.
You can talk about what's going on with your children. We cannot specifically talk about any staff,
Okay.
Former staff,
Okay.
teachers.
Mr. Cherry, just mark him off the record. So my daughter was choked out by her nose and her mouth because she went to wellness class in an unassigned area, and she sat in a desk that an athlete wanted, and she went to the point where she passed out she blacked out and she fell on the floor, and Coach Blank, since I can't say, came and woke her up and said, "You need to go to guidance." She stopped by the bathroom and cried, cleaned herself up, and went to guidance, and they were told, "Why didn't you go to the nurse? It's your fault that you didn't go to the nurse." So she went to the nurse and told the story, and was told by this particular person that I'm not allowed to name that it was horseplay, which is not horseplay. If somebody does not have consciousness at a school, they should have 911 called, period. I'm very offended by this, and I had to have violence on the school board associated with my daughter to go to Collierville High, which she had graduated from and is a scholar now in college. I don't want to say what school because I don't want anybody to come after her, but it's saddening. It's depressing that these are where my kids live. So with that all being said, since I'm not allowed to say names, which we all know names, and we all know who is in the scandal, it's not a joke. It's not funny at all. It's disgusting. But anyway, Mr. Manuel, addressing you in particular, I would like to say that there's 2 Houston High scandals up for review.
30 seconds.
And yet I would like to ask for you to retire or resign. I think you should. Our kids are expected to be safe, and they're not. They're not safe. They're not safe from pedophiles. They're not safe from people who believe in athletes. And I believe that you knew this all along. And I'm not okay with it, and you can remove me.
It's time. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Is it 3 minutes?
Yes.
I'm not ready. I don't think it has been. So in the honor of baseball games, saying that everybody should honor you, I don't believe in that. I don't think we should.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it,
You're welcome.
and I appreciate your
I just don't believe in
understanding
it.
but I appreciate your understanding the parameters we're under as a board from a legal perspective. Thank you very much for your comments.
You're welcome. I just hope that anybody with a daughter would not be okay with this. You're welcome.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Terry Harris.
Hi, I'm Terry Harris. I live at 1816 Old Mill Road, and I'm also a Houston High School parent. And I'm here tonight because I have concerns about my son and the potential effects that Tennessee Ready could have on his GPA. So I would like to applaud you as a school board for your policy and consideration this evening of not including the Tennessee Ready scores in our student grades. The reason, I know that during the work session you were given a list, but for those who may not have been able to see it or may not have been following this issue, I'd just like to go briefly over what has happened. On the very first day of Tennessee Ready, which was April 16th, the whole system shut down statewide. The following day, Commissioner McQueen said that there was a deliberate attack on the data system, that is the platform for the test. As a result, the students were not able to submit their answers. Well, we can't hold our students hostage all night, so they were allowed to go home. Normally, this would have invalidated testing. We don't allow students to leave a test before they've completed it because that opens the door for the possibility of cheating. However, the next day, our students all across the state returned to their classrooms and were able to submit their tests. Because there was no policy, because normally these tests would have been invalidated, schools all over the state did not know what to do. Some schools allowed students to change their answers, others gave them additional time, some only allowed them to submit their answers. To me, right there, that data has been invalidated and should not affect any student's grade. Also noticed on the agenda is a possible change in the policy regarding parent overrides, and that those matters, you're not automatically, it seems from reading that policy, as a parent going to be allowed to override course selection. So when those decisions are reviewed, I hope that school administration, school counselors, and school faculty will not use the Tennessee Ready data to make those decisions. Now on the 19th, we're on day 4 of Tennessee Ready. There were sporadic technical glitches again. On the 25th, there was a software upgrade that wiped out specialized rosters. Those had to be recreated. On the 26th, a dump truck in East Tennessee caused statewide connectivity problems, including those in West Tennessee. However, the internet provider, Education Networks of America, disputes whether or not it's possible for a severed cable in East Tennessee to have any impact on connectivity in West Tennessee. On the 27th, reports surfaced that 1,400 students across the state were administered the wrong grade level of tests through Tennessee Ready, and this was confirmed by Commissioner McQueen. On the 30th, there were more connectivity, login, and submission problems. This time, the Department of Education blamed those on a talk-to-text feature.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do support your policy, and I hope you will vote for it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Our next speaker is Jacob Vincent. If you will please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Jacob Vincent. I live at 2090 Allen Court Drive, Germantown, Tennessee. I'm here tonight to talk about my experience with Farmington Elementary and Houston Middle. I was started in elementary school being teased and called names, and it got worse when I went to Houston. In 6th grade, on the way home on the bus, I was singing, excuse me, sorry. I was singing a song that had been caught in my head I was singing a song. It was caught in my head all day, and I was told to stop by an 8th grader. And when I proceeded to continue to sing the song, he had punched me in my head. I then had to get off the bus in front of all my classmates and listen to their laughs as I walked up the driveway to my house. Same year, names were being called toward me all year. In 7th grade, a popular basketball player was sitting on the bench and got up and started dribbling a basketball during a PE. He then proceeded to throw the ball to the left of my head, hoping that I would flinch, and I didn't. He did this to the right of me and above my head, and when I didn't flinch any of those times, he threw it at my face, hitting me and hitting my head into the concrete wall and knocking me unconscious for a brief period of time. I then walked to the nurse's office by myself and had administrators come in and with him claiming that he had just lost control of the ball. And finally, 8th grade year, I witnessed my best friend get thrown on the ground and put in a neck brace and taken to the hospital. And I posted something about it and made comments about it, and I had gotten called into the administrator's office the next day and asked why I said the things that I said, and they were just out of defense for my friend. I don't know I can't remember any repercussions upon the students that were accused, and I'm sorry. Sorry. To end, I'd like to say that there's a lot of abuse online, on social media, that included threats by certain students and athletes that were telling me to, sorry, I was told, to kill myself many times. I was told that it'd be better for everybody if I just left. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take it to the administrator's office because I knew that nothing would happen if I did, and that it'd just lead to more torment as it had in the past. In the 8th grade year, I had been submitted to St. Francis Hospital and diagnosed with depression. I then transferred to a different school and finished my education there. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Vincent, thank you, and thank you for your strength in coming tonight and sharing your story and your strength of character.
Thank you.
Lori Vincent. Ms. Vincent, you have an amazing son.
Yes, I do. My name is Lori Vincent. I live at 2090 Allen Court. That young man is my son. And he volunteered to come here tonight to talk about his story. And I'll admit I tried to talk him out of it because I did not want him to relive that in front of a room full of strangers. But he wouldn't do it. He wanted to have his story heard, to be a voice for the other kids that this is happening to. I hope you are shocked. I want you to be angry. I need you to say this is enough. We're here tonight to talk about school safety, and I get it. Active shooters in the area, things like that are very important. And none of my comments are meant to indicate that I don't find those things to be important and steps to be taken to make sure they are safe in the school. But safety in the school doesn't stop at the doors with people who have a right to be there. In other words, it requires that desire, that need for safety to go into the classrooms to make sure that things are not happening that shouldn't happen. Policies are only as good as how well they are used. And you are exactly right. We have a system, we have a policy in place for not tolerating acts of bullying or intimidation. When these things are reported, they are supposed to be investigated. When a violation is found to have occurred, a report is supposed to be filed. It's supposed to go up the chain of command, all the way to the top. If getting punched in the face is not a violation of a policy which describes bullying as physically harming a student or damaging a student's property, what is? If having your head slammed against a concrete wall by a basketball player isn't bullying and intimidation, what is? And yet, when we requested documentation of the number of bullying reports that were made in the 2014-15 school year when my son was there, we received a report that saying the total number of bullying cases reported in that school year was 8. 8 for the entire school year for 2 middle schools and a high school and 3 elementary schools. 8. My son is 2 of them because I reported the bus incident when he was punched and I came home to find a goose egg on his head. I reported, and the school was aware of the basketball incident when he was shoved into the concrete wall and passed out and then sent by himself after having lost consciousness, sent by himself
Ms. Vincent,
to the room's office.
can you wrap up?
Yes,
please?
ma'am, I can.
Thank you.
8 incidences that were allegedly reported. My son was 2, leaving only 6 between 3 schools. 4 of those were determined to be indicated that bullying occurred. 4. So that means that when we requested reports on my son's incidences of bullying, we were told that there were none, which means that our reports were investigated and his experiences were found to not be bullying. I find that impossible to believe. Impossible by their own definition of bullying. I ask you to please listen to what Ms. Oaf said. The policies are only as good as how well you enforce them. Enforce them. Hold these teachers accountable when they're not reporting them. Holding the principal or the designee accountable when they don't do what they're supposed to do. And hold the students accountable who are violating these policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Vincent. Our next speaker is Herschel Freeman. Mr. Freeman, if you'll come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Okay, just for a point of clarification, if I use someone's official title, but I don't use their name, are we good?
No, you're not supposed to.
You just would like to shut up anything that's not positive?
No.
All right.
No. Trust me when I tell you, Mr. Freeman.
As a citizen, I'm entitled to ask questions of my elected officials.
Yes, sir.
So
you are.
I have a series of questions here, and it regards ex-principal blank, okay? This unnamed person was caught drunk at 3 a.m. putting a ladder up to the window of the 19-year-old daughter of a teacher from Houston High he had been out to dinner with later that evening.
Mr. Freeman.
I'm sorry, this is from the Commercial Appeal article.
That's not true.
Is there something wrong with that?
Yes.
What are you hiding? Why don't you let people ask you questions and be held accountable for your actions? You know, you can't even look me in the eye.
Mr. Freeman, it is a public meeting, and we do appreciate everyone who comes forward to share their concerns and their thoughts. However, it is not a meeting for the public. We do not answer questions.
No, I'm not expecting answers. I just would like to be able to ask some questions.
Yes, sir. And
Is that
what
okay?
I ask, yes, sir, if there are no disrespectful comments of any.
Okay. So here are some of my questions. When was the superintendent notified of this incident? Who told him about it? Why did he not immediately notify the school board and ask for Mr. Blank's resignation? Number two, when did the police notify the mayor and/or city administrator about the incident? Did the mayor and/or the city administrator advise the superintendent on how to proceed? Number three, when and by whom were the school board members notified of the incident? I'm concerned that its powers were usurped by other authorities and in such a way as to invite possible litigation. Number four, who authorized the $25,000 payment to Mr. Blank when he resigned? Was this authorized by the board? Is it the usual practice to make large lump sum payments to administrators when they resign? Is this a documented policy? Number five, this incident raised grave concerns about Mr. Blank's relationships with subordinate faculty, but the superintendent only reprimanded him and allowed him to stay on the job with the condition that he self-report should he do anything again like the July 2017 incident. Was the school board aware of the condition of the superintendent's reprimand? Now, I'm just about done. The bottom line is that the public deserves to know exactly how this matter was handled by public officials from the moment the 9/11 call was received from the teacher's daughter. Only if there is a thorough investigation and public disclosure of the findings and the adoption of new oversight policies will we begin to feel that those responsible for the damage done to the integrity of Germantown and its schools will have been held accountable. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman.
All right.
Sarah Freeman.
I add the weight of my interest to my husband's comments. It has been something that apparently we can't really talk about. So as though these people don't exist, as though this event did not happen. This thing that did not happen or that we cannot entirely mention, it seems to be clear that this governing body, although I think not all of you, but I think certainly the superintendent, we refer to sweep this thing that happened, this incident in the summer of 2017 under the proverbial rug. It will not work because clearly, thank you, clearly the police department of the city of Germantown was involved. Citizens of the city of Germantown were involved. How could the interest in this incident jump from the police to the superintendent of the Germantown School District without any intermediaries? Is this usual, that the police just simply call the superintendent? Really? Does that usually happen? Or do the police usually have to first deal with those who employ them? The mayor, right? The city administrator. Or is there this pipeline right from the police to the superintendent? This is a concern. This is a cover-up that goes far beyond the jurisdiction, certainly, of the school board. When was the school board told about this incident? This is extremely troubling, and especially listening to this young man. Talk about a culture. This is a culture of cover-up that leads to a level of indiscretion in terms of the treatment of not just the students, but the general citizenry of this city. This goes beyond this body, and this is unconscionable to the highest degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Our next speaker is Suzanne Walls.
Hi, my name's Suzanne Walls. I live at 2376 Redbud Trail, 38139. I have children who've gone through Dogwood, and they're at HMS now, and next year I'll have one in all 3 levels of the school system. After that young man stood up here and said what he said, they were talking about year 2014, year 2015. I want to say what has happened this year at HMS to my children. I contacted the school because we had a boy who was threatening people, kicking people, tripping people, using language that is not appropriate anywhere, much less on a school bus. The bus driver could not control him, and my son came home and said, this is what he called me. So I contacted the person at HMS that I'm supposed to contact. But I told him, my son is terrified that this kid's gonna come after him at school. That administrator pulled my son out of a class where he was with the bully, took him to his office, basically told him that it was just horseplay, that it was just, talking to, whatever, and then sent my kid back to the class with that same bully. Is that the policy? Then we had an incident where a child stole candy during an event from my same son, a different kid, different bully. Instead of the teacher fixing it right there, they went out into the hallway as they're changing classes, shoved my son, and those who know my son know he, is not a shovey first. It turned into a little, squalling fest, and my son got in-school suspension, which he earned. But why wasn't it fixed when that kid stole my son's candy off of his desk and sat there in front of him and ate it? So on to anonymous alerts, which is one of the things that was mentioned in the thing tonight. I recommend everybody go and look very closely at that website. I had an incident. I wanted to report something that a teacher made a comment about something I had said on Facebook, because I am very vocal, to one of our children. So I called Anonymous Alert, and I said, how will my son's privacy be protected? I think I was talking to people in a New Jersey garage. I was transferred 3 times. There's better customer service at Walmart. And they could never tell me how the information that would be received by this district and by that school would protect my child's privacy. I don't think they know how to. I worked in a HIPAA environment. I know how to protect privacy. They didn't even understand basic terms. Are they using a Sharpie? So I just want to be clear that while that happened to that child then, it is still happening today.
10 seconds.
That's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walls. Our final speaker for the evening will be Sheila Hahn. Ms. Hahn, if you will state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Sheila Hahn, and my address is 2964 Mallard Lane in Germantown. And what that boy said really broke my heart, I'm sure, with everyone else, and it resonated with me too. Things have happened in our family with the schools that I have not even reported because my kids beg me. My younger son started at the middle school this year, and he was drawing tattoos on his arm, and a kid told him he should kill himself. And I was like, what? I didn't know, is that just something people say and you're just supposed to let it roll over your back? That seems pretty extreme to me. But I spoke with my kids about it, and they were like, no, Mom, his sibling is really popular at the high school, and his parent teaches there, and you can't say anything to anyone. So I didn't. And my other son is repeatedly referred to, you Jew, this about Jews, that about Jews, and I just look at it as, what am I gonna do? I mean, I just teach them, hopefully, to have pride in our faith, because there's so much pressure on them. And so that spoke to me. And then I just wanted to say that when something happens like the bad news in the newspaper about the high school, it's not time to throw a party for the superintendent. And you can say, this is not the time for this. Don't celebrate me. I don't blame you for anything, but it's not party time here in Germantown. It's time to take responsibility and address the issues, not to celebrate how great we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. That concludes citizens to be heard. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda.
I move to approve all the items in the consent agenda.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve all items in the consent agenda. Is there roll call, please?
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Hoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Board action items, number 9A, the revision of policy 4.70. The chair will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the revision policy of 4.700, testing programs after one reading and waiving the second reading.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to waive the second reading and adopt the revision of policy IP 4.700, testing programs after one reading. Is there discussion?
I think because this is a hot topic in terms of testing, we will just clarify. Dr. Parks and the superintendent brought to us this revision to reduce the impact on student grades from 15% to 0. And Dr. Park gave us an expansive list of errors that occurred and frustrations that occurred, some of which were enumerated by Ms. Harris, that would impact the validity of the testing. And that is that's part of the reason that we're looking at that, so the students and the teachers would be held harmless from these testing results. So thank you to Dr. Park for that. And I also, we said this in the work session, I think we need to reiterate, thank you to all those who were in charge of testing in each of the individual schools, the amount of frustration that they must have gone through in the district office, those that headed up testing. It was not an easy season. So I know we as a board thank you for your work and perseverance in that.
Thank you, Ms. Hoff. Any further discussion, Ms. Fisher?
I just want to add that the request to waive second reading was done because if we went through the normal process of a second reading, it would not have happened until June, which would have been too late because the grades would have been posted at that time. So that's why we're requesting to waive the second reading.
Seeing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Hoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our next item for consideration is insurance renewal.
I move to approve the TLM insurance renewal for workers' compensation and employees' liability, general liability, property liability, and student accident insurance, including the optional liability quote to move coverage from $2 million to $5 million.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the TML insurance renewal for workers' compensation and employees' liability, general liability, property liability, and student accident insurance, including the optional liability quote to move coverage from $2 million to $5 million. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Hoff?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cathy, for your work on this. And thank you to TML for the wonderful partnership we've had. Our next item for consideration is the 2018-19 general fund budget after second reading.
I move to approve the GMSD fiscal year 2018-2019 general fund budget after second reading.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the GMSD FY 2018-2019 general fund budget after second reading. Is there discussion?
Yes, I would just like to make note that our numbers from a revenue perspective are still being finalized, and one of the notes that we made in the work session is that currently there are a few placeholders within the budget that we will go back. I know that people might remember seeing an unfunded request portion from our district staff, and we'll go back through that list to kind of prioritize those items once we have our final numbers. And also something that was noted in the work session, which I think is of importance, of our chairman will be reaching out to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen so that we can try and get a meeting together so that we as a school board can sit down face to face with them and explain to them not only our capital improvement numbers, but also our operating needs as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I think it's important to note that one of the primary changes based on increased funding is the now 2% cost of living increase that would be going to our staff across the district. So we had hoped to increase it from 1% to 2%, and we've been able to do that with the changes recommended in the second reading. If there's no further discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Wolf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item is the Germantown Municipal School District FY 18-19 federal capital, cafeteria, health insurance, and OPEB budgets after first reading.
I move to approve the GMSD FY 2018-19 federal, capital, cafeteria, health insurance, and OPEB budgets after first reading.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the GMSD FY 18-19 federal capital, cafeteria, health insurance, and OPEB budgets after first reading. Is there discussion?
No.
Hearing no discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Wolf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our next item is the amended portion of our agenda, 9E, which is the draft revision of policy IP 4.003.1, Honors AP DEDC courses. The chair will entertain a motion.
I don't know that our meeting's updated, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not updated.
It is.
It is, but I don't know
It
that
is.
I clicked on it.
It is.
I think I had carried it over from that.
That's okay, you can wing the motion.
Can you tell me what the policy number is again?
Yes, the policy number is IP 4.203.1.
I move to approve policy IP 4.2301 regarding
Honors AP, DEDC, and courses.
Thank you.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the revision to policy IP 4.203.1 Honors AP DEDC courses. Is there discussion?
Yes, I'll clarify because I think the board is of the same mind on this policy. The reality for us is we're not wanting to change our existing processes or the way that we approve courses or the override process. What we're talking about is the fact that sometimes courses don't make it to high school. So even though a parent will override and say, I want my child to be in dual enrollment mechatronics, if only 6 students sign up for that course, there are times where they won't be allowed to take that course. So this wasn't a philosophical debate for us about should parents have the right to override or not. That's not what we're discussing. We were talking about how to craft the wording so that it showed the same process that we currently have. We made sure that we had ways that, in situations for an IEP, for example, we have courses at the elementary and middle school level that you can only be in if you qualify for special education services. A parent doesn't have the right to override into those classes. They can't say, I want my child to be in the gifted program even though they don't qualify for that program. So know that there are limitations in the way the policy, so we were just dealing with the way it was worded tonight.
Further discussion?
Yes, I will agree with the superintendent. I don't think there is a philosophical difference amongst any of us on the board as far as what our desires are for parent input and controls into, particularly in high school and some middle school courses, what their children should take and how they should be challenged. I think our disagreement comes in wording. And so I will be voting against this policy change because I did not feel like we came to adequate wording.
And I would like to point out one thing that got me comfortable to where this is that my understanding in the conversation in the work session is that there are overrides allowed at all times in the high school as long as the course is offered and staffing is there. And if at any point anyone does not experience that as our procedure, then you just need to keep going up the chain to make sure that that is. There are limitations, as the superintendent stated, at the middle school and the elementary school. And so those are areas where we don't have the ability to agree to the override. But at the high school, overrides are accepted.
And I guess my question was, is this policy changing the current procedures at the schools? And Dr. Park said, no, this is not changing the current procedures.
Thank you. And to clarify, policy 4.2031 is for honors, advanced placement, dual enrollment, and dual credit courses. And please also know that our policies are amendable at any time should there prove to be that is something the board did ask, and clarify if there is an issue. As Ms. Jones stated, our policies are always amendable to cover anything that we perceive becomes an issue. And with that, if there's no further discussion, roll call, Ms. Subramani.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Sof? No. Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our final item is announcements. Excuse me. May 17th is our Houston High School graduation at Bellevue Baptist Church. May the 22nd, Leadership Germantown will have a ribbon cutting for the greenhouse at Houston High School at 5:30. They have completely refurbished it. Ms. Fisher was involved in that refurbished project. May the 24th is the last day of school. Seems like we just started. Registration for current students begins June the 4th. June the 4th is also the next meeting of the board. We will have a work session and followed by a board meeting. June the 8th, we will be having a board retreat for the day. And on June the 18th will be our next board meeting, which we will cover the superintendent's evaluation and contract. Please be sure to always check the GMSD website for any further information and changing dates and times. With that, we stand adjourned.